is Africa.
The year is 1928 and, hey, it's the Olympic Games. Before the 1930 World Cup, the Olympic Games was known as the World Championship of Football, until the FIFA president at the time, called Jules Rimet, wait, I know that name, he had an idea. It was a good idea. Such a good idea that it's become all we've talked about for a near century. He wanted football to have its own tournament, independent of the Olympics, where professional players could compete. So in 1928, FIFA voted to create a World Cup. Okay, that's cool. Who's going to host it? Now today, obviously, countries will spend billions trying to host the World Cup. It would be an honour to host the World Cup. However, back in 1930, literally no one really cared. If anything, it was a burden. This is what happened. Hey, so would anyone want to have the World Cup? No? Like, literally anyone. Yeah, I guess I'll have it. Who's that? It's Uruguay. Wait, why is Uruguay here again? Well, Uruguay back in the 1920s and 30s were kind of a big deal. Uruguay was seen as one of the most modern and prosperous countries in the world. So much so that they would actually build a new stadium for the World Cup and pay travel and accommodation for all nations involved. And they also won the Olympic gold in both 1924 and 1928. So it was kind of like, well, you're the best, so you might as well host it. So they did. So the World Cup is born. Ta-da! Wait, isn't there like a big problem here? What's that? It's 1930. Yeah, and? Well, we don't really have planes. So yeah, there was this thing called the Great Depression. You may have heard of it. Read a book or something. It means that traveling from Europe to South America wasn't easy, and it meant crossing the Atlantic Ocean by ship. Therefore, many countries said, we're cool. So only 13 teams even entered. The majority was from South America, with US and Mexico, and from Europe, only 4 European teams even accepted the invitation. France, Belgium, Romania, and Yugoslavia. If you're about 12 years old and don't know about Yugoslavia, again, read a book. But why 13 teams? That's such a random number. Well, Egypt was meant to be there, however, they missed their boat. Had to send a message in Morse code saying, oops, sorry, see you next time. So you got all European teams traveling on a boat together. That new stadium, the Estadio Centenario. Oh yeah, that stadium. Yeah, it wasn't finished. And keep in mind it is 1930, so football back in these days wasn't exactly the way it is now. For example, if a player got injured, tough luck, there's no subs. The referees wore suits. Yeah, actual suits. Bolivia wore berets during the matches, and Romania's squad was actually selected by the king himself and no actual manager. Oh yeah, and it was kind of like insanely violent. Argentina, for example, basically looked at this tournament and said, let's kill them. Argentina versus USA. Yes, USA made it into a semi-final of the World Cup. During this game, one American player suffered a broken leg. The players had a fight. Several players ended up injured. And guess what? There's no subs. So all injured players just continued playing. You think I'm joking? One Argentine player knocked 4 teeth out of American player's mouth. And the other one ended up in hospital. Uruguay versus Argentina in the final. This was a big deal. They don't like each other. And they don't trust each other. So much so that they couldn't agree to anything. For example, they both wanted to use their own football. Yeah, seriously. So FIFA got involved and allowed Argentina's ball in the first half and Uruguay's ball in the second. Yes, this happened. And now's the time to introduce you to Hector Castro, otherwise known as El Manco. What does El Manco mean? Well, El Manco literally translates to the one-armed one. Yes, that is what you think I just said. He accidentally amputated his arm with an electric saw at the age of 13 and also scored in the final. This guy right here with one arm. I love football. Football's great. Uruguay beat Argentina 4-2, which was not too much of a surprise, as their dominance in the prior Olympic Games meant that they were the favourite. Why were they the favourite? Well, back in Europe, they were quite well known for kind of Russian kick kind of football, where in Uruguay and South America, they actually kind of passed the ball. Yeah, it was that much of a difference. So Uruguay won, but tell that to 15,000 Argentine fans that had no idea. Yes, true story, 15,000 Argentine fans headed to Montevideo for the game on board a steamship. However, the ship got lost in the fog and arrived a day late, to find out when they arrived in Uruguay that not only are they late to the game, but they also lost. Which, as their Argentine, of course, kicked off riots. Oh yeah, also meet Alfred Vizeh Ferru. He was a Romanian midfielder. He fell ill during the trip back home on the boat. In Italy, he went off the boat and went to hospital, and the team continued back home to Bucharest. When the team arrived without him, the rumour spread that he died. So his entire family and mother was told that he was dead, and they had to make funeral arrangements, only for Ferru to walk through the door on the day of the wake. But hey, it turned out all well, as he ended up recovering and ended up being a figure skater for the remaining Olympic Games. What a time to be alive. Oh yeah, so Uruguay won, play the music. That's great. So the world's all pretty chill now, right? No. The Great Depression, that's still there. Democracy, barely a thing. And across Europe at a time period, well, it's 1934, so I think you know where I'm going with this one. Authoritarian leaders were gaining power. The main one at the time is Benito Mussolini. I think you've heard of him. Mussolini at the time ruled Italy for over a decade and determined to project an image of strength, discipline, and national superiority. Trust me, football is not political. He wanted the perfect propaganda piece. So yeah, the World Cup's now in Italy. The World Cup became one giant advertisement for the regime in Italy at the time period. As Mussolini even knew back then, as what we now know now in Russia and Qatar and so on and so forth, that hosting major sporting events can shape how the world sees your country. Mussolini was a man ahead of his time, clearly. Oh god, I shouldn't be saying that. So unlike 1930, where most nations were invited via carrier pigeon, this was the first proper World Cup, where 32 nations qualified in 16 spots to play the tournament. Ironically, defending champions Uruguay refused to take part. This was weirdly a boycott from Uruguay, as they were a bit butthurt over many European nations refusing travel to South America. Now that it's in Europe, they did the same. In this World Cup, there was no such thing as a group stage. It was immediate knockout football. Let's talk about Italy v Spain. This game was violent, where the goalkeeper suffered injuries, several Spanish players were also injured, the match ended 1-1, there was no such thing as a penalty shootout or even extra time, so the teams had to play again a replay the very next day. And due to the amount of injured players Spain had, many players were unavailable through injury, so Italy won 1-0. Yeah, this tournament kind of stunk a little bit. Remember Mussolini? Yeah, it played a big factor. There was gargantuan importance on Italy winning the World Cup. It's quite well known from numerous accounts of players, journalists, historians, and even referees that many of them felt pressure from the fascist regime. There was a good story though. The Wunder team, the Austria national team, was a nice story in the tournament. They played a nice, elegant passing style, which influenced from that point the future footballing game. And then they were beaten by Italy. Boo. And then there was Italy and Czechoslovakia in the final. Czechoslovakia took the lead with less than 20 minutes remaining. The entire stadium was about to explode, and I'll be honest, I'll be thinking about the safety of the Czechoslovakian staff and players. The idea of losing the final at home would have been truly humiliating. However, you know, Italy equalised, went to extra time, they scored again, and then Italy won. Yay. Yeah, this World Cup just kind of stank. This wasn't a sporting event, this was just a political tool. And a dangerous precedent that was set that meant that the World Cup wasn't about playing a World Cup tournament about the sport of football, but was really how to shape national identity to your entire nation. In only its second tournament, football became a political weapon. Oh yeah, football's not political. Uruguay won, Italy won. Play the music. Oh god, okay, so yeah, politics is probably kind of important for this one. It's 1938. While football were progressing quite well across the entire world, the world was not progressing, as this would be the last World Cup before the outbreak of World War II. And even before a ball was kicked, things were kicking off. After Italy hosted in 1934, many people expected the tournament to return to South America. There was an informal expectation of continental rotation. Imagine it like two upper-class neighbours really insistent on hosting a garden party to show off their new greenhouse. Oh my god, Gerald, you're growing strawberries? No way! Instead, FIFA awarded the hosting rights to France. That decision caused outrage. And this wasn't to do with the rotation, it was just because no one likes France. So when France was chosen, several countries felt betrayed. Most notably, both Argentina and Uruguay, huge footballing nations, refused to precipitate and boycott the tournament. Basically, this is what was happening. It's not fair! Anyway, Europe wasn't doing good. Just months before the World Cup, the guy with the funny mustache, which, you know, did a oopsie and annexed Austria. Austria, at the time, was one of the strongest teams in world football, with the famous Wunder team from the last tournament. So after they basically became part of Germany, Austria ceased to exist as an independent footballing nation. Some Austrian players were pressured into playing Germany's squad, while others refused. The most famous example is Matthias Schindler, who refused to play for the German national team. The legendary Austrian forward claimed that it was due to old age, as he was 35, for not playing for Germany. A few months later, he would then score against Germany in a reunification derby between Austria and Germany, which he scored and celebrated in front of the German leaders. And a few months later, he was found dead in his Vienna apartment due to accidental carbon monoxide poisoning from a blocked chimney. Any investigation into this was closed immediately by the political leaders. So I'm going to let you put 2 plus 2 together. The tournament again was still knockout football, with one of the biggest stories being Brazil, which was not known as a powerhouse of football football back in these days, and they were the only South American nation even there. The star player was a man called Leonidas da Silva, known as the Black Diamond, who basically was one of football's first true global superstars before Pele. He was a tournament's top goal scorer and helped Brazil reach semi-finals. They ended up losing to Italy in that semi-final, which rumour has it, before the finals, Mussolini sent a telegram to the team saying, "Win or die." Funnily enough, this was not meant as a literal threat, but instead just an encouragement to win. But Italy, in all fairness, was a pretty good footballing nation, defeating the host France in Paris, beating Brazil in semi-finals, and in the final came up against Hungary. Hungary at the time was one of Europe's strongest teams and scored goals freely throughout the entire tournament, beating the Dutch East Indies, aka Indonesia, 6-0, and beating Sweden 5-1 in semi-finals. Italy went on to win 4-2, successfully defending their title. But the reality is the 1938 World Cup is remembered for what happened off the pitch more than what happened on it. As Italy celebrated in Paris, Europe stood on the edge of a cliff, and the world around it was about to change forever. Many of the players, the staff, the fans that featured in France for the World Cup would see their entire lives transform forever. And when football finally returned 12 years later, it would return to a completely different world. Italy 2, Uruguay 1. Play the sad music. Okay, let's make it a bit upbeat. Samba did you know? So when the World Cup returned in 1950, it wasn't just another tournament. World War II completely reshaped the planet, stadiums were destroyed, nations were rebuilt, and entire generations grown up without a World Cup. So when the World Cup finally returned to Brazil, it wasn't just football returning, it was a world trying to feel normal again. So when Brazil got the hosting rights, it felt like a symbol of renewal for the new world. A massive new stadium was built in Rio de Janeiro, the Maracanã, designed to be the biggest stadium in the entire world, holding nearly 200,000 people. But due to what happened, FIFA had to take some time to even persuade countries to even take part in the actual tournament. For example, Italy, despite being part of the Axis powers, being the defending champions, they were invited. But not only the war was a big factor, but also a good part of the starting lineup died in the Torino Superga air disaster 1 year before the start of the tournament. So due to a bad omen, instead of travelling to Brazil by plane, they did so by boat. Of course, Germany, Japan, naughty boys were unable to qualify. In the UK, they were invited to take part. They had a British home championship as a qualifying group, and England finished first and Scotland second, both qualifying for the first ever World Cup. However, weird fact, George Graham, the chairman of the Scottish Football Association, said that Scotland would only travel to Brazil if they were the winners of the home championship. So despite them still qualifying for the World Cup, because they finished second, he refused to change his mind, so Scotland didn't take part in the tournament. And all around the entire World Cup was a complete mess even trying to create. A number of teams refused to take part in the tournament. Most nations behind the Iron Curtain from the Soviet Union, including Czechoslovakia, Hungary. Also, many South American nations also withdrew, including Argentina, Ecuador, and Peru. This is due to a dispute with the Brazilian Football Confederation. India qualified by default because other nations like Indonesia withdrew, but yet India also backed out due to lack of practice time and travel costs, despite there being a famous rumour that India were banned because they played barefoot due to a FIFA barefoot ban. Turkey also withdrew due to financial costs. FIFA invited Portugal, Ireland, and France, saying please join our tournament, in which they said nah, we don't fancy it. Anyway, we finally got to the actual World Cup. The reason why I had to go through all the withdrawals is because it made sense of why the World Cup was the way that it was. This didn't have a traditional knockout final. Instead, there was a final group stage. The tournament had 4 groups, however 2 groups had 4 teams, one had 3 teams, and the other one had only 2 teams. Group 4 was Uruguay and Bolivia. That was it, with 1 game played in the entire group of the World Cup, and Uruguay beat Bolivia 8-0. But all of the eyes were on Brazil. Brazil destroyed Sweden 7-1. They beat Spain 6-1. They were at home in front of massive crowds. Reported that at the Maracanã for the final, or the quote-unquote final between Uruguay and Brazil, they had an attendance of 173,000 people. The media basically already crowned them champions before the final match was even played. It wasn't confidence, it was certainty. So now I must present to you the Maracanãzo. 16th of July 1950, one of the most infamous days in football history. The Maracanã was essentially a celebration waiting for a trophy presentation. Brazil scored first in the second half and the noise were deafening, and then everything changed. Uruguay equalised. But due to this final group stage thing that they did, due to goal difference, Brazil only needed a draw to win the World Cup. And then came the moment that defined football history. Uruguay scored again. A man by the name of Alcides Gigia. With 11 minutes left on the clock, the entire Maracanã was silent. A moment that forever haunted Brazilian goalkeeper Moacir Barbosa, who anticipated a cross and dived a moment too late to stop the ball rolling underneath him. When the match ended, the stadium was filled with a quote-unquote disturbing and traumatic absolute silence. And the celebrations in Uruguay was so intense that 8 Uruguayans died as a result of celebrations in Uruguay. And due to this game, the Phantom of 50 has always been referenced in Brazilian national team culture. The Brazilian goalkeeper Barbosa was scapegoated for the defeat for years, not only was publicly blamed and mocked decades after the match, but he himself felt like he was never forgiven. One famous account was during the 1994 World Cup at the Brazil team camp. Officials asked him to leave because his presence was considered unlucky. He was seen as a curse. So I will leave you with this quote from Barbosa himself. In Brazil, the maximum sentence for a crime is 30 years. I have been paying for a crime I didn't commit all my life. Italy 2, Uruguay 2. Play the music. Wait, what? We're in Switzerland? I completely forgot they even hosted a competition. So if 1950 was football's first great heartbreak, then 1954 is where the sport learned a new lesson. That even the impossible can happen twice. So in 1954, the world was looking a bit more normal. The Cold War was still happening, obviously, but many economies were stabilizing, nations were reforming identities, and football was feeling normal again. But this World Cup all came down to one main nation: Hungary. Known as the mighty Magyars, Hungary was not just good, but they were revolutionary for the modern game at this time period. They had tactical fluidity, a legendary striker in Ferenc Puskás, and a 4-year unbeaten run coming into the tournament. So when Hungary arrived in Switzerland, the expectation was not whether they would win, but how easily they would do it. Austria, Czechoslovakia and Hungary, of course, returned and welcomed the debuts of Scotland, Turkey and South Korea. Nice to see that Scotland had enough money this time. However, Argentina declined to take part in another World Cup for the 3rd time, and most notably West Germany was allowed to take part in the tournament. This will become really important later, and this was the first time we had a normal looking World Cup group stage. 4 groups of 4 teams. It's not that hard. However, they still only counted 2 points for a win. We'll get there later. Hungary, of course, showed their dominance. They beat South Korea 9-0. They beat West Germany 8-3 in the group stage. However, famously, it is documented that the West German manager, knowing that they didn't really need to win the game, so to protect some of their main players, they purposely played a weaker team, just in case they played later on in the tournament. Again, this will be important later. Famously, this tournament has the highest scoring game in World Cup history that still stands to this date, which was Austria 7, Switzerland 5. And this is where we lead to the miracle of Bern. The final was played in Bern, Switzerland. The conditions were terrible, heavy rain, slippery pitch, and it didn't really matter to Hungary early on, as within 8 minutes, they were 2-0 up in the World Cup final against West Germany. However, something weird happened. West Germany scored. Then again. Suddenly it was 2-2. Hungary basically walked through the entire tournament up, and unfortunately awful conditions, they've been dragged into a real match. Keep in mind, Hungary hasn't lost a single match for 4 years before this tournament happened, and West Germany is off the back of absolute humiliation after what happened in World War II. However, in the 84th minute, Helmut ran for West Germany, scored, and West Germany are world champions. The last words that pieces this tournament together was Deutschland ist wieder was, which means Germany is something again. A true feeling of pride and redemption was brought back to the German people, and a great example of what national pride should mean for your country in sporting competition. However, 1954 is forever a black mark in Hungarian football history, and despite all of their dominance, they've not won a FIFA World Cup, and the European Championships were never even a thing, so they've got no silverware to showcase this time period. The mighty Magyars is still one of the biggest what-if stories in football history. They were meant to be the invincible team, and that myth was completely broken. And just like Brazil and Uruguay in the previous World Cup final, finals or World Cups are not predictable, and momentum matters just as much as talent. Italy 2, Uruguay 2, West Germany 1. One word. Pele. I cannot begin to emphasize the importance of Pele in the 1958 World Cup and how it changed football forever. Football in the 1930s was consumed with politics, in the 1950s was produced with shocks and political undercurrents, but 1958 felt different. Television was becoming more widespread across Europe, and for the first time millions of people were actually seeing the World Cup, not just reading about it or listening on the radio. The World Cup finally felt like a truly global stage, and in this new media-driven era came a new kind of football nation. Brazil. Sweden, to the surprise of some people, was the host. Argentina decided to finally grow up and actually take part in a tournament for once. And we got 3 new debuts in Northern Ireland, Wales, hello, and wait, is that the Soviet Union? And they were shocked even before the tournament even began. Italy failed to qualify, and also Uruguay. Northern Ireland knocked out Italy and Portugal to make it to the World Cup. However, there was some controversy. In the qualification, the Arab and Asian nations refused to face Israel. This was due to political reasons, with opposition to Israel's recognition. This included Egypt, Sudan, and Indonesia. Oh yeah, and also Turkey. FIFA had to intervene, requiring Israel to play a special playoff match against Wales, who was eliminated in normal qualifying, in which Wales won and they qualified for the first World Cup. Now, funnily enough, Pelé and Garrincha didn't play until the last of Brazil's group matches against the Soviet Union. It is important to keep in mind that England's team for the tournament was weakened due to the Munich air disaster with Manchester United, which killed 3 internationals on their books. Hungary, of course, were there, but by no means were the same team as they used to be. After their appearance in the last final, the mighty Magyars were no more, as they lost their best players 2 years before when they fled in the wake of a failed uprising against the communist regime of the Soviet Union. From that 1954 team, only 3 players remained. Just Fontaine, the French forward, broke World Cup history that still stands to this day, with the most goals scored in a single FIFA World Cup tournament, with 13 goals. However, this World Cup is all centered around Brazil, who introduced a new tactical structure that will change football yet again. They introduced what was basically flexible attacking movement, with wide wingers with creative freedom for forwards, and a young system built around flair instead of rigidity. This was the early foundations of what we now know as the Brazilian football identity. The foundations of Joga Bonito. And keep in mind, Pelé was kind of meant to be somewhat of a backup option when he entered the tournament. He wasn't meant to be a starter, as he was only 17. In the quarterfinals, he got given his main opportunity, which he scored against Wales to take Brazil to the semi-finals. It was a big moment, but he needed a bit more. Then it was France in the semi-finals. France had just Fontaine, but Brazil this game completely took over, beating them 5-2, with Pelé scoring a hat-trick. And even by watching footage of him from this game, if you could look back at it now, you could tell by his movement and his confidence that it was different to many players at the time period. Scoring a hat-trick in a World Cup semi-final was absolutely huge, but the final was on the horizon, and they played Sweden. Sweden did really well to make it through to the final, of course, beating the Soviet Union and also beating West Germany that cannot be ignored. This was a big shock, and they took the lead in the final. And it wasn't too long ago since the American Anzo against Uruguay in 1950, where the Brazilian national team was still carrying some of that pain. But Brazil responded immediately. But in that final, Brazil and Pelé took over, where Pelé scored twice, and his first goal, where he flicked the ball over a defender before volleying it into the back of the net, became one of the most iconic World Cup moments in history, especially as it was one of the first televised finals. Brazil won 5-2, and for the first time ever, Brazil, they were finally world champions, and the ghost of 50 finally felt like it was over. Pelé became the face of the sport, and Brazil truly became a football superpower. Italy 2, Uruguay 2, West Germany 1, Brazil 1. Football, otherwise known as in Chile, let's kill them! In 1962, people knew what to expect from the World Cup. Brazil were champions, Pelé was the face of football, and everyone expected Brazil to dominate again. But in Chile, for this tournament, something was quite different. It wasn't football, it was UFC. Historically, this is known as one of the most violent World Cups ever. After only 12 matches, there were 4 red cards, 37 serious injuries, multiple mass fights between the players, and several players described by newspapers as warfare rather than football. The Battle of Santiago took place during this World Cup, which I'm sure you've heard of and we'll get into later. World Cup history was broken and it still stands with a record 6 red cards. The tournament was held in Chile, a country that was still rebuilding after a devastating earthquake in 1960, which led to some questions on if they should even host the World Cup. However, you know, politics, that's still a thing. After Europe hosted the 2 previous World Cups, the American federations demanded that it was held in South America, otherwise they would stage a complete boycott. Argentina, of course, was the favourite to host it, and due to the previous boycotts and petulance of the Argentines, kinds, many people in FIFA wasn't too happy with them really hosting it. So when Chile was like, I guess we can do it, everyone voted for them. Hey look, there's 2 new debuts to the World Cup. Hello Colombia, hello Bulgaria. So yeah, back in 1960 the Valdivia earthquake happened, which was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded. With over 50,000 casualties and 2 million people affected, this completely reshaped the World Cup. As 8 stadiums were selected to host the World Cup matches, 4 of the regions were severely damaged. So due to this was the smallest ever World Cup in terms of venues, with only 4, other than the 1930 World Cup obviously. Basically at this point, the Chile government couldn't care less about this tournament even taking place. They were more bothered about trying to revive the country. FIFA created a new rule that once a player played a qualifying match for a nation, they cannot switch to another national team. Due to how the world was at the time period, this happened quite often, especially when the likes of Ferenc Puskás changed from Hungary, now playing for Spain, as he and many others fled Hungary during the failed uprising. So yeah, the Battle of Santiago. Even before we reached the knockout rounds, this World Cup was remembered for one match: Chile versus Italy. This wasn't football, it was UFC. In this match, there were multiple punches thrown, independent fights, a broken nose, 2 Italian players were sent off, the players were spitting and kicking their opponents. 4 separate times there had to be a police intervention on the pitch, and one Italian player by the name of Giorgino Ferrini refusing to leave after being sent off and being dragged away by police officers. The match was so chaotic that this helped develop the later yellow and red card system that debuted in the 1970 World Cup. Chile won the game 2-0, but no one really cared about that. Also, keep in mind, there is still no such thing as subs, so if you're injured or just beaten up, you can't be subbed off. Back in the BBC, when highlights were shown back to the British people, the BBC sports commentator David Coleman labelled this as the most stupid, appalling, disgusting and disgraceful exhibition of football possibly in the history of the game. Put that on your wall. In this game, Italian right back Mario David attempted to kick Lionel Sanchez in the head. That led to his red card. I think that's valid. There is some added context of why there was so much animosity, as back in Italy, the Italian media were very critical about the World Cup being held in Chile, labelling it as pure madness. They written the city of Santiago as a backwater dump where quote-unquote the phones don't work, taxis are as rare as faithful husbands, and its population is prone to malnutrition, illiteracy, alcoholism and poverty. The Chilean media of course fired back, describing Italians as fascists, oversexed and drug addicts. So when the Italian media came to Chile for the World Cup, they were forced to flee. So that could give you some insight of why this game was the way that it was. Italy, hello, was involved again, where Italy's match versus West Germany was described by the media as wrestling and warfare. But something else happened in the group stages. Pele was there. However, he got injured. In the second match against Czechoslovakia, he was injured early in the tournament, so Brazil had to continue without their biggest star. Many assumed at the time that Brazil's tournament was over. However, you know when I mentioned back in the previous World Cup about Pele and there being another player? Yeah, he's still a big deal. Garrincha. If Pele was elegance and genius, Garrincha was chaos and unpredictability. He had this incredible dribbling ability and defenders just couldn't read him. So when Pele was injured, he stepped up. And suddenly, Brazil didn't need Pele. The Soviet Union, with the goalkeeper Lev Yashin, arguably the best goalkeeper of all time, was in poor form, and his team went out to Chile in quarterfinals. In previous World Cups, there was multiple goals in group stages as there was a massive disparity of quality across many nations. But many nations were getting better, and this led to the lowest goal scored on average in any tournament at this point, with it being under 3 goals a game. Despite losing Pele, Brazil powered through, with Garrincha carrying them through the knockout rounds, scoring twice against England in the quarterfinals, beating them 3-1. England yet again, despite being in many World Cups at this point, still failing yet again to go far and really do anything. And Brazil's back in another final. Brazil versus Czechoslovakia. And this was a matchup of 2 completely different footballing styles. The speed, flair and attacking elegance of Brazil versus the disciplined, organised European side. And early on, Czechoslovakia took the lead. But just like the 1958 final, Brazil soon hit back, equalising 2 minutes later. 2 further goals by Zito and Vava secured back-to-back World Cups for Brazil. A successful defence of the title for the second time in history, and not to be repeated since. This World Cup is often overshadowed by the violence that took place and the political instability of Chile at the time period. However, this tournament did solidify one main thing: Brazil was a serious footballing nation. Brazil 2, Italy 2, Uruguay 2, West Germany 1. Wait, do you hear that? Oh no. Oh no, no, it's too soon. It's too soon. No, not yet. Not yet. 1966, Sir Jules Rimet came home, Bobby Charlton was crowned the new King of England, the British Empire rose up and forced the entire world to eat fish and chips every morning for breakfast, and every year on the 30th of July, Jeff Hurst was swung around the entire world like the goddamn pub, with everyone kissing his feet, which was also shortly followed by an onset of the Beatles behind him. On to the next tournament. Can I just leave it at that? Can I? No, okay. This tournament, of course, has one main story, but there's a few more things around that. Again, technology was progressing and television was broadcasting matches into people's living rooms. It again became a much more bigger deal. England were the host and there was absolute massive expectations. They never won the World Cup, never even really came close to winning the World Cup, and they believed that this was their moment. And this wasn't the first time that a country felt national pride due to a World Cup. However, in true English fashion, we tried to screw it up before it even began. Before the tournament even started, the Jules Rimet trophy was stolen from a public exhibition in London. Yeah, seriously, the trophy was gone. And if you think that's weird, have you ever heard of a dog called Pickles? Yes, Pickles. A dog called Pickles found the trophy. England suddenly had their World Cup back. Fun fact, this was the only World Cup in history that didn't have matches on Sunday due to religious and Christian laws at the time. And yet again, there was some politics. During the qualifying games, FIFA, citing logistic and competitive reasons, announced that there will be no direct qualifying place for an African team, basically saying that they didn't respect the quality or level of the African nations, seeing their position in the tournament as a wasted spot. Therefore, all 15 African nations who had entered immediately boycotted the competition in protest. Hey, we got two new nations. Hello, Portugal. Hello, North Korea. Yeah, North Korea was there. That's fun. This was Portugal's first time in the World Cup, and spoiler alert, they're pretty good. They made it to a semi-final, and they had a player which you may have heard of before. A man by the name of Vizeh, who scored 9 goals and was a Golden Boot winner. Fun fact, the mascot for the 1966 World Cup was called World Cup Willie. Yes, that is true. Accusations of refereeing bias also took place, especially towards the host nation and general European referee bias from the South American media. Inconsistent officiating involving, of course, Pele, who was repeatedly fouled and left the pitch injured. In the final group stage game against Portugal, Pele suffered 2 more heavy challenges and ended this tournament, as he was put off in a stretcher. When England played Argentina in the quarterfinals, Antonio Ratin was controversially sent off due to the referee saying he said naughty things to me. In another quarterfinal between West Germany and Uruguay, 2 Uruguayan players were also sent off by the English referee. Accusations of European bias was in this tournament completely. But if you think the storylines end there, then you're mistaken. England played Portugal in the semi-finals and England won 2-1. England won the final in England in the World Cup. Against who? Well, who else but West Germany? Just over 20 years from the ending of World War II, I don't think you need any more storylines here. The significance of this game culturally for both nations was immense. England took the lead. West Germany equalised. England scored again. Then Germany scored again, and what followed is perhaps the most controversial goal in World Cup history. In extra time, England's Jeff Hurst struck the ball. It hit the crossbar and it bounced down. The question is, did it cross the line? No one was certain. Even to this day, people still don't really know if the ball even crossed the line. Now, of course, these days there's modern technology with goal line technology, and with the footage found, they do claim that the ball did indeed cross the line. However, if you believe that, that is your own choice. They did come out and say that it was at least 1 meter over the line, which is an obscene thing to say because here's the screenshot. No! West Germany protested immediately, and it's still the most debated decision in football history, leading to more accusations of refereeing bias towards the host nation. And then Jeff Hurst scored again with a World Cup hat-trick, with the only World Cup hat-trick scored until Mbappe did it last time round. 4-2, and England are world champions. And my God, football has come home. Brazil 2, Italy 2, Uruguay 2, West Germany 1, and England 1. Play the music. Ah, baby, so now we're in Mexico. This began the love obsession with Mexico in the World Cup, which we'll also see again in 1982, but that's for another time period. Mexico is where legends are made. And guess who's back again? It's Brazil, which for many people had the greatest team ever and the birth of modern football. Featuring players like Carlos Alberto, Pele, Gerson, Jairzinho, and Rivellino. Oh yeah, and technology has gone forward again. Television was now global. This was the first World Cup that ever showed in colour. And tactics were also evolving. We're in Mexico, the altitude is extreme, and the heat is incredibly intense. Pele and the Brazil team was at their peak, with this tournament largely producing attacking football despite the physical heat. Where the other bid was submitted by, you guessed it, Argentina. Yeah, they just kinda didn't like the Argentines. Hello El Salvador. Hello Morocco. Hello Israel. Fun fact about El Salvador, they qualified for the finals after beating Honduras in a match which I think you may have heard of called the Football War. In July 1969, El Salvador and Honduras had a lot of tension, so when they played in the playoff match to qualify for the World Cup, it peaked. It is widely regarded that the tensions from this match sparked the actual war, which led to the 4-day conflict. Acclimatization was the key word for this entire tournament, as it was strongly considered for every single team taking part in this tournament. Brazil arrived with what was seen as a perfect team. This team at the time period had everything. It had Pele at his final World Cup peak, Jairzinho scoring in almost every single match, Rivellino's creativity, and Carlos Alberto's leadership. And this was a huge moment for Pele. And in the past 2 tournaments, he's been out due to injury, and he could not let it happen again, as again, he was a global superstar. So the tournament began. Brazil beat Czechoslovakia. They beat England in one of the most famous group stage matches ever, while Gordon Banks produced the save of the century to deny Pele. What a save! Gordon Banks! I think that's a good impression. Oh yeah, and you know the rule about the fact that they can't allow subs? Finally, they changed that eventually. This was the first tournament that they were actually allowed subs. Anatoly Pusak became the first sub used in FIFA World Cup history by the Soviets. I don't know why it took 30 years for them to realise this was a good idea. England's preparations for the World Cup was hindered a little bit, just a little bit, mainly due to the arrest of their captain Bobby Moore. In Colombia, he was arrested for allegedly stealing a bracelet from a jeweller's shop. The charges were later dropped. It was alleged that the English media were quite xenophobic towards Mexico's hosting of the competition, which meant the English team had a very hostile response during the competition, leading to the idea that maybe he was arrested on purpose to try to hinder their preparations. In the quarterfinals, saw one of the highest shots tally in a single World Cup game, Brazil versus Peru. Brazil won 4-2, and Brazil had 27 shots, and Peru had 22. Also, in the quarterfinals was a rematch of the 1966 World Cup final, England versus West Germany. England went 2-0 up, and Franz Beckenbauer dragged Germany back into it. Key piece of information, Gordon Banks was meant to be playing, but he didn't because he suffered food poisoning the day before. Jeff Hurst did score an apparently legitimate goal that was ruled out for offside, and then in extra time, Gerd Muller scored to bring Germany's first ever competitive victory over England. I guess you can call that karma. The semi-finals was iconic, as all 4 semi-finalists were all former world champions. Brazil beat Uruguay, Italy beat West Germany. Brazil beat Uruguay was obviously repeating the 1950s heartbreak, and for Brazil, this was very emotional. They handled it really well, and he won 3-0, and this time there was no collapse, no trauma, just control. It's great. For West Germany and Italy, however, this match became known as a game of the century, and today has a plaque outside the Estadio Azteca to commemorate it. The game ended 1-1 and went to extra time, and in extra time, 5 more goals came in, and it swung between both sides the entire way, and at the end, Italy won 4-3. So here's the final. Brazil versus Italy. South America versus Europe is always a storyline in these World Cups, and a rematch of football philosophies. Brazil yet again, flair, movement, creativity, attacking prowess. Italy, structure, discipline, and defense. And for a while in this game, Italy did resist, but in the second half, Brazil, well, they broke through, and then they didn't stop. Brazil won 4-1, but came along one of the most famous World Cup goals, the final goal in particular. A move involving almost the entire team, with one-touch passing, movement, intelligence, and at the end, Carlos Alberto, the captain, finished it off, and it is one of the greatest team goals ever. You've seen the clip, and if you haven't, I beg of you, watch it back. Brazil have won the World Cup for the 3rd time, and they've earned the right to permanently keep the Jules Rimet trophy, forming a new rule that if you win the World Cup 3 times, then you keep the trophy. And this was the last time the Jules Rimet trophy was even used, and from the next tournament became the official World Cup trophy that we know today. This World Cup was highly regarded as one of the best World Cups ever. In contrast to the physical style in the previous 2, this was known for attacking play adopted by most teams. And fun fact, this was the first World Cup to even use a ball from Adidas, as before, for example in 1966, it was Lazinger that made the balls for this tournament. And with Pele lifting the trophy in the Estadio Azteca in Mexico City with the famous picture being took place, it was in this World Cup that football became beautiful. Brazil 3, Italy 2, Uruguay 2, West Germany 1, and England 1. Hello, we're in Germany. It's West Germany. What's the difference? Oh, it's a long story. The beautiful free-flowing Brazil team in 1970 was fresh in everyone's memory. However, a new football philosophy was rising in Europe. A more intelligent, more sophisticated style of football. Some will call it total football. May I present to you a man you may have heard of called Johan Cruyff. A new footballing power emerges called the Netherlands. A team that not only never won a World Cup, was barely even ever in World Cups, but they arrived with something completely revolutionary. They placed a system where players constantly swapped positions, defenders attacked, and attackers defended. The structure was fluid and unpredictable, and it caused chaos. And at the heart of it all, there was Johan Cruyff. He wasn't just a player, but he was the system on the pitch. He would drop deep, create, dribble, lead attacks, and dictate the tempo all at once. And due to the way that they played, no one really knew how to defend against them, due to how fluid they were. And when Brazil arrived in 1974, it was different. Pele was gone. A large majority of the 1970 team was gone. This was a new Brazil that was more structured and less expressive. But FIFA had an idea. They had to make it weird. In 1974, they had a group stage. And then a second group stage. Yeah, it existed. Why did they do this? Don't really know why. And this was the first time there were ever such thing as a penalty shootout. But yeah, it all seemed a bit Stupid. There was no knockout games at all, where there was 4 groups of 4, then led to 2 groups of 4. Each team played each other once, and whoever topped that group in the second group stage would make it to the final. But hey look, there's some new debuts. Hello East Germany, hello Australia, hello Haiti. Wait, Vizeh? Who is Vizeh? Vizeh, otherwise known as what you may know today as DR Congo, as he was the first sub-Saharan African team to qualify for a World Cup. And hey look, it's another boycott. The Soviet Union refused to play the second leg of the qualifying playoff against Chile after the match was scheduled at Santiago's Estadio Nacional. The stadium had been used as a detention center following Chile's 1973 military coup, where the detainees and torture victims were detained at the stadium. So when USSR said, "We're not going there," FIFA said, "Okay, cool." So they declined to move the match, and Chile was awarded a walkover and qualified for the World Cup. They literally had to play the match with no team there and scored the goal into an empty net, which again was quite a controversial moment. In the first group stage, Netherlands immediately impressed and dismantled their opponents with ease, as due to the fluidity, players didn't know who they were marking at any given time. Meanwhile, West Germany and East Germany quietly progressed through the tournament. However, they were in the same group, and East Germany v West Germany happened, which was the first time they ever played each other at a top-level international competition, and surprisingly, East Germany won. The West German players knew that their manager, who was born in East Germany in Dresden, needed to win the match at all costs, as East Germany viewed the match as a class struggle between the politically significant West Germany. However, funnily enough, this actually led to West Germany's favour, as East Germany, despite topping the group, ended up in the significantly tougher second group, with Netherlands, Brazil and Argentina. Brazil was still strong, but came up against Netherlands in the final group stage game, where Neeskens and Johan Cruyff scored again, and the Netherlands beat Brazil 2-0 to make it to the World Cup final and top in the group. Whereas on the other hand, the likes of Poland, Poland, in a much weakened group with Sweden, Yugoslavia and West Germany, they ended up second, advancing to the third place match and reaching their third place tournament position, the best they will ever do. In a match between Poland and West Germany to decide who would make it through to the final, West Germany and Gerd Muller scored again, with Gerd Muller beating Just Fontaine with the most goals ever in a World Cup in all competitions. So here comes the final, West Germany versus the Netherlands. And before Germany even touched the ball, something happened. The Netherlands scored early from a penalty, before Germany even had a touch of the ball. However, West Germany didn't panic. They took control, they equalised, and they kept themselves very disciplined. And then Germany scored again, leading 2-1 in the final, and the Netherlands had gone from favourites to chasing the game. The beautiful total football and Johan Cruyff trying to dictate the game. Whatever they did, the structure of West Germany absorbed it. Gerd Muller scoring the winner, and West Germany held on, winning the World Cup on home soil. Despite earlier embarrassment to East Germany early in the tournament, they redeemed themselves. And what felt like another clash of philosophies between total football and a more disciplined, structured style. Netherlands was still the people's champion as Johan Cruyff became a global icon, as West Germany solidified themselves again as a force for years to come. Brazil 3, Italy 2, West Germany 2, Uruguay 2, England 1. Oh wow, so finally they got their World Cup. However, maybe there was a reason why Argentina probably should not have been hosting a World Cup, as football in previous World Cups was more about reunification and total football and expression, as we've gone back to 1934, because we're going to learn a new word today. That word is dictatorship. Yeah. Power, politics, control. The tournament in Argentina would become the most controversial in World Cup history, not because of one match, but because of everything outside of football. The problem was that the World Cup was awarded to Argentina back in 1966, long before anyone could predict what the country would become. So 10 years later, when the tournament arrived, Argentina was under a brutal military dictatorship. Therefore, the tournament was marred with controversy, domestic politics, and alleged interference and match fixing by the Argentine military junta government, as similar to 1934, seeking legitimacy of their nationalistic propaganda, whereas the regime tried to promote the event as a peaceful modern Argentina. At the same time, reports of human rights abuses and political repression was emerging from within the country. Football was on the pitch, but fear was off it. Argentina in many World Cups had a strong squad, and led by Mario Kempes, they had talent, physicality, and a home advantage. Brazil arrived, but not as the favourites anymore. The golden era was fading. With Pelé gone, the magic was gone, and the Brazil team was good, but not iconic, which led to the idea that this tournament was really anyone's for the taking. It's important to also keep in mind that Brazil was forced by the tournament's organisers to play all 3 of its first group stage matches in Mar del Plata, which was heavily criticised due to its terrible pitch, deemed as nearly unplayable by many journalists and media, leading to accusations that, unsurprisingly, Argentina was trying to sabotage Brazil's competition. And you know the second group stage thing that they thought was a great idea, even though it sucked, and it obviously is stupid? Well, guess what? I'm gonna smash my head against against the wall because they still did it again. Oh hey, some new debut teams. Hello Iran, hello Tunisia. England didn't qualify, but guess what? Who did? Scotland. Hello lads. Just to clarify, I'm about 6.5 hours into making this video. Just to give you an idea how long this is taking. And I'm only about halfway through. Like this video right now, please, I swear, I beg of you. So, there were some controversies. Let's start with a main one that happened before we even reached Argentina. Johan Cruyff. Johan Cruyff infamously didn't take part in this World Cup. Why? Was it due to injury? Was it due to politics? It was always rumoured that he didn't take part due to the idea that he didn't want to give any credibility to the Argentine military coup. But the main reason that he gave was that he was actually kidnapped in 1977 in Barcelona. Johan Cruyff spoke about this years later, quote unquote, saying, "I had a rifle to my head, I was tied up, my wife tied up, and the children were in the apartment in Barcelona. For several months after this ordeal, he had his house under police protection, claiming that he had concern for his well-being and his family, and if he ended up going to Argentina, the only thing that he could think about was his family's safety. To use his words, there are moments when there are other values in life." And this ordeal ended up being pivotal for the Netherlands national team, as we'll get into later. The tournament began kind of normal, with the bigger surprise being that Austria finished ahead of Brazil in their group. In a match between Brazil and Sweden, the referee Clive Thomas awarded Brazil a very late corner kick. Zico got a header directly from that corner kick. By the way, there was no second phase of play, it was directly a header from the corner itself. However, the referee blew the full-time whistle before Zico made contact with the ball, and the goal was disallowed. But then came the second round, and then came the most debated matches in World Cup history. Argentina versus Peru. Now, in the second group stage, Argentina and Brazil ended up in the same group. Both Brazil and Argentina beat Peru and Poland, and it led to a 0-0 draw. In the final group stage game, Brazil beat Poland 3-1. Argentina had to beat Peru by 4 goals. You're never gonna guess the result of the game. Argentina won 6-0. Now, you may be there thinking, wait, but they played at the same time, right? So why does it matter? Well, they didn't. Brazil played at 16:45 Argentine time, in which Argentina would play 2.5 hours later. Argentina knew the result of the game, and they knew the exact scoreline they had to win by. And it's Argentina in Argentina during a military dictatorship. I don't need to put 2 + 2 together to think what may have happened here, guys. Now, officially, no formal wrongdoing was proven. There was no proof that Peru was potentially bribed out of losing this game heavily on purpose. This didn't stop the suspicion, and let's be honest, with football being all about corruption, let's be honest here, they probably rigged that. This is largely due to the fact that Peru and Argentina, despite Argentina winning in the past 4 games before this, they were always quite tough games in results of 3-1, 1-0, 2-1, and 3-1. It seemed really out of the ordinary for it to be suddenly 6-0. And you would have thought this would be the reason why they would make the last games of group stages play at the same time. But no, we're going to wait till 1982 for the disgrace of Gijón for that. We'll get to that later on. However, in Group A, it was an all-European affair with Netherlands, Italy, West Germany, and Austria. And Netherlands was still there being very dominant and ended up topping the group, making it to the World Cup final. However, that wasn't the main story in this second group stage, that going to Austria v West Germany. In the game known as the Miracle of Cordoba, West Germany was surprisingly beaten 3-2 by Austria, which marked the end of them being world champions. Due to the significance of the Second World War, this was the first time in 47 years that Austria defeated a team from either Western or Eastern Germany. Brazil ended up in the 3rd place game against Italy and ended up winning and were dubbed the moral champions due to the fact that they didn't lose a single match, and due to the fact they felt cheated out of being knocked out by Argentina against Peru. The final, Argentina versus the Netherlands, which was obviously controversial, as the Dutch accused the Argentines of using stalling tactic to delay the match. The host team came out late and questioned the legality of a cast on Dutch players Van der Kerkhof's wrist, which allowed tension to build in front of a hostile Buenos Aires crowd. And again, South America versus Europe. Netherlands with a much more tactical style of football, and Argentina playing an aggressive, emotional football. The atmosphere obviously was intense, with the Dutch complaining about stadium conditions, the crowd pressure, and psychological intimidation. The entire national identity of the country was on the line. And this was the Netherlands doing it without their main man, Johan Cruyff. So again, leads to another what if on if he was there, would they go on to win it? And whereas Argentina took the lead, the Netherlands equalised late on, leading to extra time. And in extra time, Mario Kempes became the defining figure in Argentine football. He scored, won the Golden Boot, and the game ended 3-1. And Argentina won the World Cup 3-1 on home soil in front of their beautiful, amazing dictatorship. Oh god, football, I love politics. Argentina celebrated wildly, and due to what happened during the game, the Netherlands refused to attend the post-match ceremonies after the match ended, and losing their 2nd consecutive World Cup final, both times to the host nation. And in this era of the 70s, the Netherlands solidified themselves as one of the greatest what-ifs, as one of the nearly men in international football. as spoiler alert, they didn't even qualify for the 1982 or 1986 FIFA World Cups. But whereas Argentina celebrated under their dictatorship, celebrating a global football triumph, a celebration carried a shadow where outside of Argentina off the pitch, it was still deeply divided politically. And many people around the world questioned the tournament's legitimacy due to the surrounding circumstances. It remains one of the most politically charged tournaments ever held. Brazil 3, Italy 2, West Germany 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, Argentina 1. Whew. I love paella. In 1982, the World Cup changed. Massive. The World Cup expanded, with more teams, more nations, and more pressure. The tournament expanded from 16 teams to 24 teams, but there was still that stupid second group stage. However, the winner of the second group stage led to a semi-final. This was seen as a good thing, as meant more nations could be involved, including new debutants and underdogs making their debuts. Hello Honduras, hello Kuwait, hello Algeria, hello Cameroon, and hello it's New Zealand. Nations like Czechoslovakia, England, and Soviet Union were all back in the World Cup after 12-year absences. As keep in mind, England didn't even qualify for the World Cup since 1971 in Mexico. Spain, similar to Argentina, were given the hosting rights back in 1966. As again, we're going to use our favourite word, dictatorship. As even at the time of Spain being selected, the country was still under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. However, Franco's regime ended in 1975 with the death of Franco. Culturally, for Spain, this was a massive moment to host the World Cup. Spain was still undergoing a major transition from dictatorship to democracy, despite Spain not going too far, and had some entertaining matches. The tournament was hindered by some violent fouls, some poor officiating, overcrowded stadiums, very hot weather in some cities, and alleged collusion and corruption between teams. Between Italy and Argentina, Claudio Gentile's intense and often violent match-going fouling and marking of Argentine player Diego Maradona. You may have heard of him. FIFA changed the regulations to his officiating because of this tournament. Fun fact, this is a tournament where the only game in World Cup history had 10 goals scored by one team. This was Hungary beating El Salvador 10-1. Algeria 2, West Germany 1. One of the biggest upsets in World Cup history at the time period, where a newly emerging African side beating a European giant. Africa in previous World Cups were kind of always mocked and kind of put to one side. However, this sent a message that it may not just be between South America and Europe anymore, that Africa and other parts of the world was closing in the gap. However, what happened next would overshadow everything. In the final match of the first group stage, West Germany met with Austria, in a match later dubbed as the disgrace of Gijón. As we found out with Argentina v Peru, Algeria already played their final group game in the previous day, and West Germany and Austria knew that a West German win by 1 or 2 goals would qualify them both to the next round, and a draw or an Austrian win would eliminate the Germans. After 10 minutes, the game is quite normal. West Germany scored a goal to go 1-0 up, and after that moment, it can only be described as two teams kicked the ball around aimlessly for the rest of the match. Angry, furious chants was happening from the Spanish crowd, while angry Algerian supporters waved banknotes at the players. This performance was widely deplored by the entire footballing world, even by the German and Austrian fans. One German fan was so upset by his team's display that he burned his German flag in disgust. There was absolutely no urgency or attacking intent. This match became a symbolic agreement to protect both teams' interests, and Algeria was eliminated because of it. And finally, at last, the rule got put into place that the final 2 games in each group would be played simultaneously. France were leading 3-1, and France got a goal that was contested by the Kuwait team, who had stopped playing after hearing a piercing whistle from the stands, which they thought came from the referee. This caused complete outrage, where even the president of the Kuwait Football Federation rushed onto the pitch in his fury to talk to the referee. The referee, by the shock of almost everyone, reversed the initial decision and disallowed the goal. However, France would just score again and won the game 4-1. The match between Brazil and Italy, known as one of the best games in the entire tournament, when the man by the name of Paolo Rossi became the star of the tournament. Brazil's attack versus Italy's defense, and the majority of the game playing around the Italian area. Brazil, the likes of Zico and Socrates, couldn't get past them enough. Brazil only needed a draw and Italy needed to win, and Paolo Rossi took the game and scored a hat-trick, and Brazil's most beautiful team yet again had been eliminated. A man called Diego Maradona was also at this World Cup, and when Italy beat Argentina 2-1, Argentina had to beat Brazil and were 3-1 down. Argentina scored in the last minute, with Maradona kicked Brazilian player Batista in the groin and was sent off in the 85th minute. That's not surprising. And as mentioned earlier, people knew the quality of Maradona, such as in the Italy game, they fouled him repeatedly. Some were absolutely obscene at how they got away with it. Italy carried the momentum forward and defeated Poland in the semi-finals, whereas the other semi between France and and West Germany being the main story. The game was 1-1 in the second half, where Batterson was racing clear towards the German goal. Batterson going through on goal and Schumacher the German goalkeeper. Batterson flicked it past the German goalkeeper and Schumacher appearing to not even go for the ball and instead clattered straight into Batterson, which left Batterson unconscious and knocked 2 of his teeth out. Labelled as one of history's most shocking fouls. And despite Batterson being down for several minutes, was still unconscious and with a broken jaw and carried off the field on a stretcher, it was deemed as not a foul and was awarded a German goal kick. Yeah, imagine that. And the game carried on for it being absolutely immense. France went 3-1 up in extra time. Germany somehow clawed it back to 3-3 in extra time, and then came the first ever World Cup penalty shootout. And who made it through? Germany. And here is the final. Italy versus Germany in Spain. The game was tense, and in the second half at 0-0, Paolo Rossi struck first. The Germans tried to press forward and Italy exploited that, scoring again and again, leading 3-0. Despite Germany scoring later on, the Italian president Sandro Pertini wagged his finger at the cameras in a playful way, saying, "You're not going to catch us now." This was seen as quite a shock, as Italy made it out the first round without even winning a game. Italy was somewhat the dark horses and no one really expected much of them, and lived in the World Cup for the third time in their history, with Paolo Rossi finishing as top goal scorer and becoming the face of the tournament. In many ways, 1982 gave football everything: beauty, controversy, and redemption. And somewhere between the disgrace of Gihon and Paolo Rossi's resurrection, the World Cup proved that dire alone is never enough to guarantee success. Brazil 3, Italy 3, West Germany 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, Argentina 1. Maradona. We can move on now. Okay, we'll talk about it. Hello, we're now back in Mexico. They must really like the fajitas, as this was the first time they've ever gone back to the same nation twice. Now, technically, it was meant to be Colombia to host the competition. However, due to the expansion of the World Cup, it was much more challenging to host. Colombia demanded that it was put back down to 16 teams, but it was too late, so they withdrew, knowing that they could no longer afford to host a tournament. And fun fact, this was when the official Mexican wave first came through, which became popularized worldwide and featured during the tournament. We're now truly in the modern global era, with television coverage was massive, everyone has televisions, and tactical systems are now more advanced than ever, and now players are basically global celebrities. And similar to the last World Cup, it was again even more intense in terms of conditions. The altitude affected stamina, the heat drained the players, and matches turned absolutely chaotic late on. Due to this, it became a tournament where individual brilliance could matter more than structure, and nobody embodied that more than Argentina's captain, Diego Maradona. However, we got some new debuts. Hello Canada, hello Denmark, hello Iraq. Have I mentioned Diego Maradona? Argentina was a strong nation, but they were not the overwhelming favourites. At the time, that possibly would have been more said for West Germany, but it didn't matter, because West Germany didn't have Diego. Every attack seemed to flow through. Every moment of danger came from him. He wasn't part of the system, he was the system. And this tournament was defined by 2 goals that came in the very same game. England versus Argentina in the quarterfinals. And keep in mind, this is political. This came just 4 years after the Falklands War, and the political tension between England and Argentina was already massive. Fun fact, before I get into that, do you know that Sir Alex Ferguson was the manager of Scotland in the 1986 World Cup? Yeah, seriously. And finally, they got rid of the absolutely idiotic second group stage with a round of 16 bracket. And a fun fact, Morocco became the first African team to make it to the second round of the World Cup, reaching round of 16, topping their group actually ahead of both Poland and England, and also Portugal. This was a huge moment in adding the credibility to the African game. But we all know where we need to go to. England v Argentina in the quarterfinals. So let us set the scene. It is hot, very hot, and the stadium has that big random shadow in the middle of it. Diego Maradona punched the ball into the net. The referee missed it, and there's no such thing as VAR. The goal was given and Argentina was 1-0 up. He literally punched the ball past Peter Shilton. After the game, Maradona claimed the goal was scored a bit with the head of Maradona and another bit with the hand of God. This became known as the hand of God goal. However, the true brilliance of Diego was showcased in the second goal, where both almost good and evil were shown in the same game. Literally voted the goal of the century, Diego Maradona dribbled half the length of the entire field, going past 5 English players before rounding off the goalkeeper and putting the ball in the back of the net with 20 minutes to go. In the space of minutes, he created both the most infamous illegal goal in history and possibly the greatest goal ever scored. Despite Gary Lineker scoring to make it 2-1, Argentina held on and won 2-1. In Argentina, this game was seen as revenge for the Falklands War. And after England, Argentina believed that they could win it all. And Maradona somehow got even better. Against Belgium in the semi-final, he scored another 2 brilliant goals, literally dragging Argentina to a World Cup final in Mexico. Despite the best efforts of the opponents, they knew what he was going to do, they just couldn't stop him. And here lies the World Cup final. Another South American versus European affair. Argentina beat West Germany at the Azteca. And it looked like it was too easy, with Argentina not just going 1 but 2-0 up in the 55th minute. And it looked like Argentina was strolling to victory when West Germany made a comeback. 2-1 and then 2-2 from Rudi Völler. However, with 7 minutes left on the clock, a pass from Diego Maradona gave Bruchaga the chance to score the winner for Argentina. 8 years on from their controversial home triumph, Argentina regained the world title, and 30 million people in Argentina celebrated in the streets of the final victory. And unlike 1978, where politics played a massive factor and overshadowed their victory, no one could take this away. And it was beautiful, as he was risen up in the center of the Estadio Azteca, similar to how Pele were, a star and a legend of the footballing game was born. And as we've seen in other tournaments, can be won by brilliance or creativity, or can be won with discipline and with structure. The World Cup proved yet again, similar to Pele, that maybe all you need is one special player. And in 1986, it was Diego's. Brazil 3, Italy 3, West Germany 2, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1. So remember back in 1934 when I said that the Italy tournament kind of stank? Because, you know, the entire Mussolini thing. Well, it's 1990 and Italy, you know, was a bit different. This was a modern democratic Italy. Stadiums were iconic, the crowds were massive, the Serie A league is one of the best leagues in the entire world, and the expectations was high. However, the football itself was slow. Very slow. This World Cup is widely known as one of the most tactical and, I guess in some ways, boring World Cups. Football was more tactical than ever, defences were stronger than it ever was, and goals were becoming harder to find. From the quarterfinals onwards, there were only one game that had more than 2 goals. With an average of 2.21 goals per game, this is a record low that still stands to this day. And then a record 16 red cards, including the first red card in a final. But there were some pretty good stories. Hey look, it's a brand new rule. Due to how defensive and cautious this game were, this led to the introduction of a pass-back rule. And on top of that, after this World Cup, introduced 3 points for a win instead of 2, all for done on purpose to encourage attacking play and to increase spectator interest in the sport. But before getting to that, hey look at some new nations. Hello Costa Rica, hello the United Arab Emirates, hello Ireland. Yeah, this is Ireland's first appearance in a World Cup. And this was the last tournament involving the Eastern Bloc, so say goodbye to Czechoslovakia, Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. You was awkward. Now, England in the 1980s weren't particularly doing too great, and it was rife with hooligans, which spilled over in the European continent and put a dark cloud over the heads of English football. The most prominent being well known in the 1985 European Cup final in Brussels from Vizeh, where 39 mostly Italian Juventus supporters were killed during a match between Juventus and Liverpool. This hooliganism also followed the England national team. This led to one of the biggest police operations in Italian football history, with 7,000 local police officers just there to maintain the English fans, which was justified as there were several riots during the time, leading to a number of injuries, arrests and even deportations. However, the actual England team did pretty well. Very well, actually, as they made it to the semi-finals. They played cautious, organised football. They weren't favourites, but they were grinding their way through the tournament. There were some dramas regarding the seedings between Spain and England, as they felt like England was purposely put in Group F just to keep their fans off the Italian mainland, as being in the top-seeded teams put you at an advantage, and Spain suffered because of it, being out of the top seed. But if you know, then you know. Let's talk about Cameroon. The biggest story from this tournament came from Africa, as Cameroon stunned Argentina in the opening match of the World Cup, before topping the group ahead of them ahead of Romania and the Soviet Union. The success was fired by the goals of Roger Milla, a 38-year-old forward who came out of international retirement just from the personal request of the president of the country just to play in the World Cup, scoring 4 goals, and his flamboyant goal celebrations made him one of the tournament's biggest stars, knocking out Colombia in the round of 16 and making it as far as the quarterfinals, where, you know who, England knocked them out. Boo. People don't like England, so when England beat Cameroon, no one, and I mean no one, liked that. Cameroon made history, becoming the first African team to make it to a quarterfinal of the World Cup. Speaking of history, hello, Republic of Ireland. Taking one look at Group F makes you think about how the tournament went. 6 games played, with the maximum goals scored being 2 and the maximum goals conceded being 2. Ireland's match versus Romania remained goalless, and Ireland won 5-4 on penalties, becoming the first team since Sweden in 1938 to make it to the quarterfinals of the World Cup without even winning an actual game. It's the round of 16, and hey look, controversy. Argentina beat Brazil, however, with a bit of help, as Brazilian player Branco had been offered offered water given by the Argentine team by Maradona and Ricardo Giusti. However, came to find out that his water was spiked with tranquilizers. Despite the press claiming that this never happened, Maradona literally confessed this on live TV in Argentina years later. How about West Germany versus Netherlands? Inter and AC Milan were both massive teams at the time period of players like Breme, Matthäus Klinsmann, Van Basten, Ruud Gullit and Frank Rijkaard. And after 22 minutes, Rudi Voller and Rijkaard were both sent off, including Rijkaard spitting on Rudi Voller. And as the players were walking off, Rijkaard spat on Rudi Voller for the second time. Yeah. That's insane. Italy knocked out the Republic of Ireland, ending their tournament. And as we all know, England beat Cameroon. England knocked out Cameroon thanks to penalties from Gary Lineker. And again, no one liked it. Again, there was many negative tactics from this tournament, with many teams having the intention of trying to look in a penalty shootout rather than going forward. The main two exceptions being West Germany and Italy. Argentina were prime examples of this trend because 3 of their best players left the squad due to injury. And unsurprisingly, Argentina dragged Italy to a penalty shootout. And in the other semi-final, West Germany versus England, that again was a 1-1 draw and went all the way to penalties. And this is England, and this is penalties, and you probably already know what's going to happen next. England lost. So came the final again, West Germany versus Argentina, being cited as one of the more cynical and lowest quality World Cup finals in history. Argentina, weakened by suspension and injury, barely had any attacking threat and just wanted to take it to penalties really, despite having Diego Maradona on the pitch. And with 5 minutes left to go, West Germany had a penalty. As Andreas Breme converted a penalty, in the final few minutes, Argentina went down not to 10, but to 9 men. For the first time ever, Argentina were the first team to not score in a World Cup final after all these years. And West Germany have done it, winning their 3rd World Cup. And Franz Beckenbauer becoming the first man not to both captain but also manage a World Cup winning team. And unlike 1986, there wasn't really many iconic moments or legendary performance. This World Cup will always be remembered as one of the most defensive tournaments ever. And despite the stories of Cameroon and Republic of Ireland and England, from this moment football began searching to find a way to bring that joy back. Brazil 3, West Germany 3, Italy 3, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1. I'm gonna tell you something that you probably already know. The world ain't sunshine and rainbows. Wait, sorry, wrong script. FIFA likes money. I know, it's crazy, I know guys. Football was just Europe and South America's game. But FIFA wanted expansion. Global markets, new audiences, massive stadiums, huge commercial potential, and TV audiences waiting to be tapped into. And nowhere symbolized that ambition more than the United States. A country where football is not even probably in the top 5, probably not even the top 10 sports in the entire country. But FIFA didn't care. The World Cup was becoming a global product, and therefore came a different kind of World Cup atmosphere. The stadiums were of course huge, the crowds were diverse, and the entertainments were heavily commercialized. I mean, all you're gonna look at is the opening ceremony of the entire World Cup, with the infamous meme of the woman kicking the ball into the net and actually miss-hitting the ball and it going wide, yet the effect of the goal exploding still continued. Oh god. But despite all the cringe of American capitalism, one main thing happened, and that was goals. The goals were back. The tournament became the most financially successful in World Cup history. Tournament records with overall attendance of average of 68,000 people per game. Figures that still stand as of today. Oh hey, it's some new nations. Oh hey, Saudi Arabia. Oh hey, Nigeria. Saudi Arabia making it there was actually a huge shock. However, the agony of Doha is forever etched in Japan's football history, as Japan faced Iraq in what was a sure win game, and they ended up drawing 2-2, allowing South Korea to qualify. Oh yeah, also, how can I forget? Hello Greece, also making a debut. Russia qualified, but of course no longer referenced as USSR or the Soviet Union for the first time. Bulgaria was there, and he had a man called Stoichkov that you're going to find out is actually kind of a big deal. So to add some context behind this, Major League Soccer was founded in 1993 and began operating in 1996. So the actual professional soccer league of the actual country that hosted the World Cup didn't even exist. I mean, it's insane to think that basically the World Cup was used as a marketing product to simply launch the league in the country. So it felt almost insane to give them the World Cup. There were even proposals by FIFA to introduce larger goals and breaks after every quarter instead of just a half time, in order to appease US television advertisers. Of course, this was ultimately rejected, and thank God for that. Oh yeah, and how can I forget about the El Americananzo? If you know, then you know. Brazil beat Chile in 1989. The events of this game made that Chile were banned from even qualifying for the 1994 FIFA World Cup. This was a World Cup qualifier for the 1990 World Cup. Brazil were 1-0 up, and then the Chilean goalkeeper Roberto Rojas pretended to be injured by a flare thrown by Brazilian fans. The incident is considered by historians and football football experts as one of the most shameful events in world football history. And this event was so bad and so embarrassing that it resulted in Chile being banned from qualifying for the World Cup entirely and ended Rojas's career, and he was banned for life. Yikes. Yeah, that's rough. So how about Brazil? Brazil was always a main team that everyone talks about for good reason. Led by Romario and Bebeto, Romario being the main defending player of the tournament and being the difference maker that Brazil needed. On the other end of it, there's Argentina, which saw the end of Diego Maradona's World Cup career, as Maradona was banned from the tournament by FIFA after failing a drug test. And staying in South America, we need to talk about Colombia. Colombia had a pretty successful qualifying campaign. Colombia had high hopes of making it far in the tournament. However, one of the most darkest moments in World Cup history took place. Andres Escobar, I'm sure you've heard his name, I'm sure you already know. In the second match between USA and Colombia, defender Andres Escobar sadly scored an own goal in this game, effectively eliminating Colombia from the competition. The team was rife with influence from betting syndicates and drug cartels in the country, with the coach of the Colombian national team, Francisco Maturana, receiving death threats over his squad selection from the drug cartels. And only 10 days later, after Andres Escobar made it back to Medellin, in Colombia, he was shot to death outside a bar, which many believe was in retaliation for his mistake, and exposed the real pressure and danger surrounding football in some regions in the world, and the consequences of a World Cup felt even heavier than ever. Bulgaria was one of the biggest surprises of the tournament. Bulgarians never even won a game in their previous 5 World Cup appearances, but Stoichkov changed that, winning the Golden Boot of the entire tournament, dragging Bulgaria all the way to a semi-final, beating champions Germany in the process in the quarter-finals too, and by some distance being one of the biggest shocks in recent World Cup history at this time period. They were not the only surprise, as the United States actually made it out of the groups, but were eliminated by Brazil in the round of 16. But hey, there's no shame in that. Massive shout out to my boys at Saudi Arabia and also Nigeria, that in their first World Cup both also made it out of the group stage and into round of 16. Well done, lads. Italy quietly made their way through the tournament, knocking out Nigeria, Spain and Bulgaria in the semi-final. With Italian star Roberto Baggio not scoring in the group stages, he made it his own in the knockout rounds. Baggio scoring twice against Nigeria, the win against Spain and 2 more times against Bulgaria. The story of this tournament was so clearly going to be Roberto Baggio, until it happened. The final between Brazil and Italy at the Rose Bowl in Los Angeles with almost 100,000 people in attendance. Brazil and Italy played great football and people were expecting a game of a lifetime. But what we got was even more iconic. The first ever World Cup final decided on penalties. After a 0-0 draw and defenses controlling a lot of the game, the biggest nightmare situation actually happened, that a team could lose the World Cup in a simple penalty shootout. Both Brazil and Italy missed their first penalties. Baresi even missed. Romario stepped up and put it away. Massara of Italy missed and Dunga put it away. It was all on the shoulders of the 5th penalty taker, Roberto Baggio, to keep Italy in the World Cup. And infamously, Roberto Baggio, he missed. And Brazil are world champions for the 4th time in their history. With a nice touch, the Brazil national team dedicated this World Cup to the Formula 1 motor racing champion Ayrton Senna, who passed away at San Marino Grand Prix only 2.5 months prior to this tournament. I saw a clip actually of this week of Roberto Baggio still apologising for him missing that penalty in the 1994 World Cup final. To this day, it still haunts him. Which I think he just kind of needs to chill now, because even if he scored, Brazil just had to score their goal and they won the World Cup. So it may not have even mattered. I know, despite previous controversy, the World Cup was actually very successful in America. At nearly 3.6 million people, attendance remains the highest in World Cup history that still stands to this day. Football is now truly a global superpower. 1998, it's just going to get better. Brazil 4, Germany 3, Italy 3, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, and England 1. In 1998, it was a great year. Kylian Mbappe was born, and so was I. And now I feel like a failure. The World Cup was in France. Defeating Morocco in the bidding process, they were given the honour. And the World Cup yet again was expanded, expanding from 24 teams to 32. Oh baby, we've got to make that money. And France was ready with a newly built Stade de France ready to go. Hello, there's some new nations. Hello Croatia, hello Jamaica, hello Japan, hello South Africa, and many more stars that you absolutely will know. And for the first time since 1978, we're going to get a new winner. France entered the tournament not just as host, but as a nation trying to define its footballing identity. This was a nation that very rarely made it far in World Cups. Despite being in the World Cup since its inception, they never made it to a final. They did come 3rd place 2 times, however, at the same time, so did Poland. But France's squad reflected a changing world, with diverse backgrounds, multiple football cultures and a blend of technical and physical strength. And at the center of all of that, you've got Zinedine Zidane. And similar to someone like a Johan Cruyff in 1974, he wasn't just a midfielder or a player, he was the rhythm and the system behind the entire team. And as the tournament went on, he became inevitable. However, let's talk about our favourite nation, Brazil. Coming in as reigning champions, they had a few players that you may have heard of. Maybe someone by the name of Ronaldo. The Ronaldo. Looking at the teams that was involved in this World Cup, it truly felt like a World Cup. This was the first World Cup since the introduction of golden goal. The concept that if you score a goal in extra time, then you win the game, which I still think to this day is a dumb idea. One key detail is about the draw. Organizer Michael Platini later came out in 2018 saying that the draw at the group stage had been fixed, so France and Brazil were kept apart until the final. Quote unquote, we did a bit of trickery, we did not spend 6 years organising the World Cup to not do some little shenanigans. Yay, rigging, I love it. I want to highlight my boys in Scotland who made it to the World Cup and failed to get out of the first round for the 8th time in the FIFA World Cup history, a record that still stands to this date. Sorry about that. In the group stage, Spain being the main shock, failing to even get out of a group with Nigeria and Paraguay. Romania with the likes of Hadji also being a good story, beating England in the group stage and topping the group. There was some drama though in Group A. Basically, Morocco was beating Scotland 3-0 and they were going to qualify the group. However, Brazil subbed off many of their players, playing a bit of a weaker team against Norway, and in the final 7 minutes, conceding not just 1 but 2 goals to have Norway beat Brazil the World Cup. Not only did the weakened team annoy Moroccan fans, but also the very controversial penalty that also led to the last minute goal. Some would say it's soft, some would say it's incorrect. Either way, Morocco, they weren't happy. So not much really happened in the group stages. Then came the round of 16. The main story came from Argentina v England. The Falklands War was still long in the memory, and what happened in 1986 and Maradona Hand of God was still right there. Argentina even played in their away kit because they thought it would give them good luck like it did in 1986. First half saw 4 goals, with Michael Owen scoring an incredible run to put England into the lead. However, in the second half at 2-2, the tournament's eyes came to David Beckham, who retaliated after being fouled by Diego Simeone and was sent off. Yeah, that's Diego Simeone. In an unnecessarily and childish way, kicking out at Diego Simeone, which put England down to 10 men. The game went to extra time and penalties, where despite David Seaman saving Hernan Crespo's penalty, Porridge later missed. And it all came down to David Batty, who in his own words said it was the first penalty he had ever taken. He stepped up, and Carlos Roa, the Argentine goalkeeper, made the save. And England yet again lost on penalties, which especially hurt as in 1996 they also lost their semi-finals against Germany, also on penalties. The heartbreak and fallout from this game rest on David Beckham's head, almost literally, as the media piled in on him and effigies of Beckham was burned on the streets. Speaking of England, we cannot ignore about the hooligan aspect. Hundreds of English and Tunisian supporters clashed in Marseille, leading to numerous arrests and injuries, and ignited more concerns about English football and their hooligan aspect, which plagued international tournaments for decades. Brazil had a bit of a scare where Denmark actually were in the lead against them. Denmark was a surprise of tournament despite their success in recent European Championship, leading against Brazil, making it 2-2 and only just getting beaten at the end. The famous 90th minute winner of Dennis Bergkamp against Argentina happened here, where I'm sure you've seen the goal, which the commentator sounds like he's just screaming, "There is Bergkamp! There is Bergkamp!" If Bulgaria was the main talking point of the last World Cup, this year's was Croatia, when a man by the name of Davor Suker stepped up, scoring against Romania in the round of 16, scoring against Germany in the quarterfinals and beating Germany 3-0 by the way, and then scored against France to give Croatia the lead in the semi-final. However, France were too tough, with Lilian Thuram scoring 2 goals to send France to their first ever World Cup final. Round of applause for Croatia, because keep in mind, this is their first ever World Cup, but you know, historically, Yugoslavia, I guess you could say they were in it before in the past, but you know, fair play. Brazil v Netherlands were a fantastic game. Kluivert keeping Netherlands in it to extra time. Arna Ronaldo scoring yet again. And I mean, the teams involved was just stacked. Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Roberto Carlos, Bergkamp, Kluivert, Edgar Davids, De Boer. And it went down to penalties with Ronald De Boer missing, and Brazil were in a World Cup final yet again. And the final was perfect. It was literally rigged so that they couldn't play each other until the final. It was the final. However, there was something weird going on behind the scenes. Pre-match build-up was completely dominated by the removal of Brazilian striker Ronaldo from the starting lineup. And back at the time of the lack of media, no one knew what was going on here, only to be reinstated back in the starting 11 45 minutes before kickoff. In the entire game, he only had 1 chance for Brazil in the 22nd minute, with Zinedine Zidane and France took complete control of the game. Something seemed off, and at the Stade de France, Zidane scored. and then scored again from a corner. And in the final seconds of the game, Emmanuel Petit set France to life. France 3, Brazil 0. France have won their first World Cup, becoming the 6th national team to win the tournament on their home soil. So, what about Ronaldo? It came out later that Ronaldo suffered a seizure just hours before the final against France. This was why he was removed in the first place. And despite how poor his performance was, it made sense. So why was he put back in the starting 11? Was he even medically cleared to play? Was his health put at risk? This led to the rather popular Nike conspiracy theory. Due to the over-commercialization of the World Cup thanks to the USA, this wasn't just a sporting competition, there was a lot of money in the line here. So rumors spread that Nike had pressured Brazil to play on Ronaldo because he was the face of their marketing campaign. Despite investigations looking into this, there was no proof that this ever even happened. But all of this just led to a weird taste in everyone's mouths. And just like that, France gone from underachievers to world champions in one tournament. And Zinedine Zidane became a national hero, and a new football superpower was born. Brazil 4, Germany 3, Italy 3, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, and France 1. Oh yes, baby. For the first time ever, the World Cup is hosted in Asia, co-hosted by South Korea and Japan. If 1994 was about commercialization and expansion of the World Cup, or in 2002, it was now global. And don't forget, in 8 years' time, there's also South Africa hosting another World Cup. This was a statement from FIFA. Football belonged everywhere now. And it made it a bit more interesting. In this era, it began the idea of 2 nations hosting together. Or in some cases, like Euro 2020, about 12 nations. There was a great vibe for this tournament. However, it quickly became known for something else. Controversy, shock results, and one of the greatest redemption stories in football history. Let's talk about the new teams. Hello China, hello Ecuador, hello Senegal, hello Slovenia. Senegal, you say? Well, you may hear them later on, because this tournament was just mental. So mental that I kind of have to go through it quite fast, otherwise this video will literally be 3 hours long. Let's talk about France. France had everything. They had Zidane, they had experience, they had expectations. However, they did a very French thing and completely collapsed. Zidane was injured, however, this couldn't be an excuse for how poor they actually were. Incredibly, in the group stage, France failed to score a single goal in the entire World Cup. Eliminated in the group stages in a group of Denmark, Senegal and Uruguay, the scene was set in the opening game of the World Cup where France lost 1-0 to Senegal, who, by the way, Senegal, this is their first ever World Cup. Papa Bouba Diop scoring the only goal in the game. They still had Trezeguet, Thierry Henry, Petit, Vieira, Desailly. This is still a good team, and they got embarrassed. And to this day, with 1 point and 0 goals scored, the worst defending champion in World Cup history. South Korea, in a group of US, Portugal and Poland, they beat Portugal with the likes of Luis Figo, and they ended up qualifying top of the group. Republic of Ireland was there, and they also qualified as well out the group. However, I do need to talk about one key detail: the infamous Saipan incident. This incident kind of overshadowed the entire tournament. Ireland's captain Roy Keane, you may have heard of him, became furious with the team's preparations for the World Cup, complaining about the poor facilities and travel arrangements, what he saw as a lack of professionalism from Mick McCarthy, the Ireland's team manager. In a team meeting, Keane and McCarthy had a heated confrontation in which Keane was sent home just days before the World Cup began. So despite the fact that they actually made it to the round of 16, and they did lose to Spain on penalties in the end, given how good Roy Keane was and how important he was, questions were asked on if they would have gone maybe further if they had Roy Keane in that squad. And on the other side of the bracket was South Korea. Let's talk about South Korea. I want to be happy about South Korea. I want to be really happy about how they went on an incredible run and they became the tournament's biggest story. Oh yeah, by the way, Turkey are there too in the semi-final, but we'll get onto them later. And they didn't just get lucky and play the lower sides. No, they beat Italy and then beat Spain to make it to the semi-final. However, their path was surrounded by massive controversy. Refereeing decisions in their matches was heavily debated and still discussed today, especially the game against Italy. Regardless, they became the first Asian team ever to reach a World Cup semi-final. And you know that golden goal rule that was mentioned in the last tournament, it's still here. Italy took the lead in the 80th minute, and then South Korea scored in the 88th to equalise. Francisco Totti was sent off, and then the golden goal by Yong-hwan sent South Korea through. Several contentious decisions was made throughout the match, with many fouls not given, with contentious offside goals. A lot went against Italy in this game. Scoring a goal in extra time to win the game in golden goal, and it was written off. And the same thing happened again against Spain, in which Spain and South Korea was a 0-0 draw and ended up going to penalties. Spain scored not just once but twice, and both goals were disallowed. One due to alleged shirt pulling and the other one due to an offside. A quoted by the Spanish player Ivan Helguera saying, "What happened here was robbery. everyone saw two perfectly good goals. If Spain didn't win, it's because they didn't want us to win. So the feel-good story about South Korea kind of was still there. And then they faced Germany. And surely even now, they would lose. And thankfully, in some ways, otherwise I would be insistent that this was robbery. Germany and Michael Ballack scored and South Korea was sent home, even though they actually were already home. Oh yeah, let's talk about Turkey. Turkey made it through to a World Cup semi-final, beating Japan in the round of 16. Senegal and Turkey was a dream matchup for a World Cup quarter-final, two nations that had a opportunity of a lifetime, with Turkey scoring in golden goal, sending themselves to the semi-final. And they came up against Brazil. And Brazil were kind of good. Brazil beat Turkey 1-0 by a goal by, you guessed it, Ronaldo. Oh yeah, Ronaldo. Well, it wasn't just Ronaldo. The new 3R attack, which I don't think was even called the 3Rs, but I guess it is now. Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho. Each player had a different role in the team, but together they were absolutely unstoppable. Ronaldo's World Cup back in 1998 ended in very disastrous fashion, with the illness and the injuries that plagued him. It felt like a weird missed opportunity. But in 2002, he came back and scored repeatedly, scoring 8 goals in the entire tournament, winning the Golden Boot. He didn't score in the quarterfinals against England, but he didn't need to, because even when Michael Owen put England ahead, Rivaldo's and Ronaldinho's free kick was enough to send Brazil to the semi-final. Ronaldo will score again against Turkey, and then came the final. Germany versus Brazil in Yokohama, where Germany for many people had really no flair. They unsurprisingly had discipline and structure, and a goalkeeper in Oliver Kahn in extraordinary form, but Ronaldo was obviously ready. After a goalless first half, Brazil took the lead through Ronaldo 67 minutes in, where Oliver Kahn quoted his only mistakes in the entire tournament happened in this game, and 12 minutes later it happened again. As the ball passed through Rivaldo's legs, Ronaldo was there, smashing the ball into the bottom corner. Brazil 2, Germany 0, and Ronaldo's redemption was complete. Brazil became 5-time World Cup winners and was undoubtedly the biggest and most successful national team in football history. As the images came out of Cafu raising the World Cup trophy high in Yokohama, Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Brazil undoubtedly ruled the world. But with Bulgaria and Croatia, and now Turkey and South Korea, where it seemed like the same nations were in the semi-finals at every tournament, it really felt like any team in any part of the world now had a chance of going far in a major tournament. Brazil 5, Germany 3, Italy 3, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, and France 1. The 2006 World Cup. As I said earlier, I'm born in 1998, so I'm 27 years old. So the 2006 World Cup was my first ever World Cup that I really remember, and for that reason, I want to give a massive shout out to all of the World Cup stickers for every single event. I remember collecting the stickers for this World Cup and also the cards. I would go collect the stickers now, however, they used to be 50p, and now I don't even want to know. How much are they? Oh wow, they're £1.25. Anyway, 2006. And we're back in Germany. The stadiums were great, the atmospheres were amazing, and there were some great storylines. Say hello to some new players, you may have heard of them. Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. And as one generation ends, a new one began. Some focus onto Germany, who was the horse of the nation. This was a country that won multiple times, but still searching for its first triumph since the nation's reunification, as they only ever won as West Germany. As the 2006 World Cup stands as one of the most watched events in television history, garnering an estimated 26.29 billion views compiled over the course of the tournament. Our favourite nation, Brazil, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Ronaldo, Adriano, on paper, they had the most talented squad. However, as we later find out, they were playing more like a team of individuals than an actual unit. The storyline also led to Zidane's last dance, and France weren't even really the favourites. In fact, they struggled to even qualify from the group stage. Zidane, at the age of 34, was still dictating matches in his elegant fashion. France were basically dragged into contention by one man refusing to let his career end quietly. Oh yeah, of course, new nations, and there's a lot of them. Hello Angola, hello Ukraine, hello Ghana, hello Ivory Coast, hello Trinidad and Tobago, hello Togo, hello Serbia and Montenegro. What even was that team? By the way, there was of course obvious accusations of bribery and corruption that led to Germany's bid even being won, as Germany beat South Africa to host the World Cup by only 1 point. In the knockout rounds, Australia played against Italy, when their journey ended to a controversial penalty scored by Francesco Totti. Oh yeah, and do you like fighting? In the round of 16, a new World Cup record was set, with the most bookings, yellow cards and red cards in World Cup history, otherwise known as the Battle of Nuremberg. This match saw 9 yellow cards to Portugal and 7 to the Netherlands, where 4 players being sent off. Why was there so much violence? Honestly, I don't really know why. Portugal and Netherlands played 2 years prior. They met in the semi-finals, but that featured nowhere near the same level of animosity between these two teams. Just taking one look at the Wikipedia page, and it just looks funny how silly it looks. Oh yeah, I've not really mentioned England. In 2006, this was part of the England Golden Generation era, with the likes of Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney, David Beckham, and the same talking points were said on how do you play all these players together. In the quarterfinals, there was 2 main highlights. England v Portugal. Despite Portugal in the Battle of Nuremberg, they had 2 players suspended from that game, including Deco. Didn't really matter because they still beat England anyway. The game ended 0-0 and it went to penalties. And it's England and penalties. I think you know where we're going with this one. Lampard missed, Gerrard missed, and Jamie Carragher also missed. The final penalty being scored by a kid called Cristiano Ronaldo. Yeah, he's going to be a big deal. And it was in this game where the infamous wink happened between him and Wayne Rooney, trying to wind up his Manchester United teammates, leading to Wayne Rooney being sent off in the process, and that wink being in the papers for weeks on end. The next game was Brazil v France, and Brazil were poor, with only 1 shot on goal the entire game. Despite all the players they had, they just didn't play well at all. Well, Zinedine Zidane's dribbling earned him the man of the match, and the free kick to Thierry Henry that resulted in the winning goal. Germany v Italy, where Fabio Grosso scored in the 119th minute, putting an end to Germany's undefeated record in Dortmund. Portugal was in the first semi-final since Eusebio 40 years prior in 1966. Zinedine Zidane's France was too much. Yet again, Zidane scored, and it felt too good to be true. Italy versus France, and there were already goals in the first 20 minutes. France were given a controversial penalty kick in the 7th minute. Zidane, in a World Cup final, Penenco'd the goalkeeper, hit the crossbar, bounced behind the goal line just, hit the crossbar again, and bounced out of the goal. Somehow, someway, it went behind the line, and France were ahead. But in the 90th minute, Marco Maserati scored to equalise the game, and it went to extra time, and what followed was absolute insanity. Have you ever headbutted someone? No. Well, Zidane decided now was a good time to headbutt someone in the chest. Absolute confusion as the world stood by in shock, seeing a tournament that was dictated by this one man end his entire career in the most confusing of fashions. Now, what did he say that made him so annoyed? Of course, they were trash talking throughout the match, and Materazzi claimed that Zidane's behaviour was very arrogant towards the Italian players. It is widely understood that this is what happened. Materazzi and Zidane were fighting for the ball. In the process, he grabbed Zidane's jersey. Zidane confronted him and said, "If you want my shirt, I will give it to you afterwards," in which Materazzi replied back saying that he would prefer his sister instead, where Zidane would then go on to headbutt him in the chest. He was sent off in the 110th minute. With 10 minutes left to go, it went to penalties. Italy in yet again another World Cup final penalty shootout, where every single player in the shootout scored other than one: David Trezeguet. And Italy were world champions for the 4th time. But the image that defined the tournament wasn't really Italy lifting the trophy. It was, in a way, but really, it was Zidane walking past the World Cup trophy, head down after being sent off in his final ever game, with a confusing and tragic ending to one of football's greatest ever careers. 2006 World Cup felt like the end of the old legends and the beginning of a new era. Zidane, Ronaldo, Luis Figo, Nedved, Beckham, Cafu, Totti, Del Piero, Van Nistelrooy, Ronaldinho, Makelele. 2006 was arguably one of the biggest end of an era tournaments ever. And now we enter into the new era. Brazil 5, Italy 4, Germany 3, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, and France 1. Trust me, it's getting hard to do this. By 2010, the World Cup has finally entered the internet age. Football was global, instant, constantly analysed and constantly criticised. And for the first time ever, the World Cup was held in Africa. And South Africa had a sound, a feel, something so different to any World Cup prior. May I present to you the Vuvuzela. Oh my god, the Vuvuzela. The World Cup being on African soil carried a huge symbolic weight. A new continent hosting, a post-apartheid nation trying to showcase their national identity, and showcasing not just South Africa, but what the entire continent is about. Buzzing noise of the Vuvuzelas was iconic, controversial, and just downright annoying. If you love it or hate it, you can't say that it's not unique. The colour, the vibe, the branding was just incredible. The FIFA World Cup game I remember playing, I don't know why, but being on the Xbox 360, playing the 2010 South Africa World Cup game was just amazing. You got Shakira Waka Waka this time for Africa. You've got Khan waving flag, bro. Oh, hi, there's some new nations. I mean, technically Slovakia's there for the first time as an independent nation. Same can be said for Serbia. Now, yes, there was some more bribery and corruption scandals. Apparently, in the 2015 FIFA corruption case, that high-ranking officials from a South African bid paid over $10 million in bribes to the FIFA vice president Jack Warner and other executive committee members. 5 new stadiums were built for the tournament, and 5 of the existing venues were upgraded. Just over $1 billion was spent in building this tournament. Almost every single thing about this World Cup was weird or different. For example, have you ever heard of the Jabulani? Where the only way that I could describe is that the ball was simply too round, which made it that when the ball was hit with certain velocity, that it moved in a irrational way, which made it almost impossible for goalkeepers to predict its movement. And as we found out, Diego Forlan loves this baby. Fun fact, New Zealand, with 3 draws, were the only undefeated team in the entire tournament, but they were eliminated in the group stage. And this tournament had one team written all over it: Spain. Spain were not just a team, but they were a football philosophy built around tiki-taka, or the FC Barcelona way of playing the game. Short passing, constant movement, and ball control as dominance. And at the centre of it all, you got Xavi, Sergio Busquets, and Andres Iniesta. But at first, it didn't seem like that, as they actually lost their first game in the tournament, losing 1-0 to Switzerland. However, they did bring it back and ended up topping the group. But for whatever reason, many nations in this World Cup completely fell apart and was disastrous. Let us begin with our best friends, France. France in 2002 were a complete shambles. They can't be any worse than that. France, in a group of South Africa, Mexico, and Uruguay, came bottom again with only 1 point, but it wasn't as bad, I guess, because at least they scored 1 goal. The likes of Zidane criticised the French team for lack of teamwork and a complete lack of effort, overshadowed by Nicolas Anelka launching verbal abuse towards the coach Raymond Domenech. This happened during half-time, which Anelka was then dismissed from the squad, which resulted in many squad members, including captain Patrice Evra, boycotting training in the lead-up of the next game against South Africa. And after losing to South Africa, the French national team went home in absolute disgrace. So how about Italy? Italy were the reigning champions, and this set a dangerous precedent where, for some reason, it appeared that if you won the World Cup, then you automatically would suck in the next one. When France won in 1998, in 2002, they were out in group stage. When Brazil won in 2002, they were knocked out early and had a really poor World Cup in 2006. And now Italy has won 2006. Italy finished dead last in a group with Paraguay, Slovakia, and New Zealand. Italy came bottom of this group with not a single win. South Africa not making it through, but was a good vibe. How can forget the Tushalabala? South Africa scoring the first goal in the World Cup against Mexico. Goal Bafana Bafana. Goal for South Africa. Goal for all Africa. Still remains as one of the most famous commentary pieces in history. Let's talk about England. England started off in a very funny way. When the group stages came out, the English media in the front pages of newspapers labelled it as easy. England, Algeria, Slovenia, Yanks. When England played USA in the first opening match, if you were watching on ITV, when Steven Gerrard scored, you didn't even see the goal in the 4th minute. For whatever reason, it went to an advertisement. What was pretty much one of the only happy moments in the entire World Cup, 1.5 million people that watched on ITV didn't even see the goal. And shortly after, the USA scored with something that was also incredibly funny. England was in the knockout rounds, but no one really cared because they had Germany. Hey, maybe something may happen. No, England lost 4-1 with the most pathetic attempt at defending you've ever seen. And it was at this moment that England was really at its lowest. In what was seen as a golden generation, it couldn't feel any further from the truth. Yes, in the England v Germany game, there was the Frank Lampard goal that massively went over the line and wasn't given. I would be annoyed by it, but honestly, we would have lost anyway. It really doesn't matter. But due to this did lead conversations of there being goal line technology in the near future. Oh yeah, shout out to the USA, where a 91st minute winner by Landon Donovan sent USA to the knockout rounds. A massive moment for US soccer. Or football. Lionel Messi, I've not really talked about him yet, mainly because he didn't really do anything. He played in all group stage games and didn't score a single goal. Diego Maradona was a manager of Argentina, by the way, so imagine that dressing room. Ronaldo, kind of similar to Messi, didn't really do too much. And then came the Netherlands. The Netherlands were always known for total football, always trying to play football the right way. And this kind of meant that Netherlands was a fun team, but in many ways a soft team. Well, that was not the case. This team team was physical, direct, and very efficient, beating their opponents, in some cases literally beating them, or shall I say kung fu kicking them in the chest. Brazil had the likes of Kaká and Robinho, Luis Fabiano, Dani Alves, but in reality they were just not the same Brazil, as Wesley Sneijder was the inspiration for Netherlands throughout this tournament. The Netherlands knocked out Brazil in the quarterfinals, and then came Uruguay v Ghana. Oh wow. Luis Suarez, even to this day, he cannot go to Ghana, or even Africa at this point. Uruguay v Ghana in Johannesburg saw one of the biggest controversies in World Cup history in the modern era. It was extra time. It was at a time in extra time, and Ghana had a chance. The ball was guaranteed to go in the back of the net, and Ghana was going to score in the 120th minute to send Ghana, an African nation, into a World Cup semi-final for the first time ever in the African World Cup. It was meant to be, until Luis Suarez did something that would never be forgiven. But in many cases, for him back home, he was a solidified hero forever. He literally slapped the ball off the goal line, preventing it to go in the back of the net. He was red carded, and Ghana was given a penalty. However, incredibly, Asamoah Gyan missed that penalty kick off the crossbar. Suarez celebrated. Uruguay went on to win on penalties, and Ghana's tournament was over. In the post-match interviews, Luis Suarez claimed that the hand of God now belonged to me. Lionel Messi's Argentina was knocked out 4-0 by Germany, where Lionel Messi only had one assist in the entire tournament with no goals. The semi-final saw a huge opportunity for either Uruguay or the Netherlands. This was the first time since really the 1950s where Uruguay was even a consideration to be going far in a tournament. Van Bronckhorst scored an incredible goal from about 1,000 yards out, and Diego Forlan scored from another great goal. The Jabulani in this game was just remarkable, but Wesley Sneijder and Arjen Robben scored again, and Netherlands were sent through to the World Cup final for the first time since 1978. In the other semi, Germany v Spain was a bit more controlled. Spain won 1-0 thanks to Carlos Puyol goal, as Spain v Germany was a rematch of the 2008 final 2 years prior in the European Championships. It had the same result, as Spain won again, and we had a final that was on the cusp of history, Spain versus the Netherlands, and we were guaranteed to have a new winner of the FIFA World Cup. The final in Johannesburg was tense and aggressive. The game didn't really have any rhythm at all. It didn't really have any attacking flair, where Nigel de Jong literally kung fu kicked Xabi Alonso in the chest. In the 62nd minute, a moment that would have not just haunted Netherlands but Arjen Robben for a long time. Arjen Robben was set through on goal 1-on-1 with Iker Casillas, where somehow the goalkeeper able to save Arjen Robben's shot with the toe of his boot. And with 4 minutes left to go into the end of the game, Andreas Iniesta was found in a ton of space from a short pass from Cesc Fabregas. With a right-footed shot into the bottom left corner, Spain were World Cup champions. And what Spain created was a legacy. Not just winning the World Cup, but also Euro 2008 and 2 years later, Euro 2012. Spain was the new gem of the footballing era. With tiki-taka, they controlled matches without dominating physically. And at this point, it became blueprint for modern football. And the legacy of the 2010 World Cup could be remembered for many things. But for me, I will always remember it for one thing. Brazil 5, Italy 4, Germany 3, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, France 1, Spain 1. Brazil. La 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 la. Okay lads, it's 5 in the morning, I am losing my mind. Each World Cup that goes on, I'm actually making it longer and longer if you've not realised. Because there's just so much to talk about, and in the modern ones, I know more things. So I'm gonna have to try to shorten this, because at some point I will lose my mind. I am 1 hour 44 minutes into this video, oh my god. The 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil, it kind of felt like football came home. I am sure you've gathered that throughout this video, Brazil have been a massive footballing nation who play beautiful football. So when Brazil got the hosting rights for the first time since 1950, it was a big deal. And was there good vibes? Oh, there was good vibes. Unless if you lived in Brazil in some places, then there was not good vibes. Now in Brazil, football is basically a religion now. With anything less than lifting a trophy on home soil, and despite all of the success, the ghost of 50 Americananzo against Uruguay still is a shadow that follows the national team. Anything less than lifting a trophy on home soil was seen as a failure. And there was a political undercurrent behind it, as billions were spent on stadiums and infrastructure to host the tournament, despite the fact that in many areas of the entire country, they are still in deep poverty, leading to protests bringing the idea that maybe that money should have gone to, you know, healthcare, education, or housing instead. And this was happening throughout the entire tournament. And there's one name on everyone's lips: Neymar. Since 2010, a young kid from Santos has took over the entire world and took over my FIFA Ultimate Team. In 2013, getting a huge move to FC Barcelona. And in an era since 2006, it felt like Brazil have lost its way. A new Leonidas, a new Ronaldo, a new Pele. Neymar was that man. This was the first time that goal line technology was in place. Ole, 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 ole. Still a great song, I don't care what you say. Fun fact, there were 9 goals fewer than were scored in the group stage than in the entire 2010 tournament, and had the largest average goal scored in the group since 1958. You know when I said about the curse about if you win the World Cup, the next time round you suck, and you know when Spain won the 2010 World Cup, well guess what? They sucked. We saw Spain, the reigning champions, and after just winning another European Championship, was eliminated in the group stage. It happened again, losing their first game of the World Cup 5-1 to the Netherlands, repeating what was the World Cup final only 4 years prior, where the iconic Robin van Persie flying Dutchman took place. This symbolised the end of the tiki-taka dominance. There's a kid called James Rodriguez at Colombia. He may be a big deal later on. Keep an eye on Group D, what people label as the group of death. England, Italy, Uruguay and Costa Rica, what everyone assumed was going to be European dominance. And that did not happen. England came dead last, not winning another game in the tournament, and Italy got knocked out in the end by Uruguay. This was no longer even meant to be the golden generation. It was just nothing but suck for the England national team. Suarez would do it again. Just like how he did to Branislav Ivanovic against Chelsea, well, he did the same thing again against Giorgino Chiellini. Why did he bite him? I don't know. FIFA said, no, you can't do that, and gave him a massive ban and became one of the most infamous incidents in World Cup history because the guy literally bit people. I don't get why he did it. Unlike 2010, it felt like Messi was actually here, scoring against Bosnia and Herzegovina, scoring a 90th minute winner to beat Iran for Argentina. Argentina may be back. How about Ronaldo? Well, Germany beat Portugal 4-0. You can thank Pepe for a stupid red card for that. The USA almost beat Portugal, but Varela scored to make it 2-2, but by then it was already too late. Ronaldo finally scored to beat Ghana 2-1, but the damage was done. Ronaldo is yet again going home with nothing to show with. You know that kid James Rodriguez that I told you to keep an eye on? Yeah, watch him. For whatever reason, this kid may have been on drugs. James Rodriguez scored one of the greatest World Cup goals. They later won the Puskás Award. 25 yards out, the ball dropped to his chest, who immediately from his chest volleyed it left-footed and smashing the underside of the crossbar. It was incredible. And for the first time, Colombia made it to the quarterfinals in their history. Netherlands v Mexico, and an Iron Robin may or may not have completely dived and may have been an absolute scumbag. Huntelaar put it away and Netherlands knocked out Mexico. And Iron Robin can never go to Mexico ever again. Hello, Costa Rica. They were the story of the tournament when they knocked out Italy and England in the group stage. So when it was Costa Rica v Greece, it felt like a huge opportunity here. And the reality is everyone wanted Costa Rica to win. So they did. And Belgium versus the US, basically Tim Howard was on some kind of chemicals, as he made a total of 15 recorded saves, which was the most saves recorded since FIFA even began keeping track of saves. But in the end, Belgium broke through with Kevin De Bruyne and Lukaku, and the US was sent home. Brazil v Colombia, David Luiz scored a second goal in the game, which was incredible from about 40 yards out. But the main talking point was what happened later, as in the 88th minute, Zuniga challenged for the ball and then in the process kneed Neymar in the back. This would seem at the time as not that big of a deal, but it was. Neymar was badly hurt and injured and suffered a fractured vertebra, meaning that he was out for the entirety of the tournament. Netherlands broke Costa Rica hearts, and this was when the famous Tim Krul sub happened, and what appeared to be the first time in World Cup history, a goalkeeper was subbed on in extra time to take part in a World Cup penalty shootout. His tactic worked, and Netherlands knocked out Costa Rica, with Tim Krul making some saves. But nothing would prepare the world for what happened in Brazil's story. They reached the semi-finals, and they were playing against none other than Germany, and the first 30 minutes can only be described as horror. One of the most shocking results in World Cup history, where in the first 30 minutes Germany scored 5 goals. Germany were 5-0 up in Brazil's back garden in their own World Cup, in front of their own fans. This wasn't just a loss, this was national trauma, later nicknamed the Minerazo. And just like 1950, where the Maracanãzo against Uruguay haunted the entire nation, it happened again. Messi's Argentina, however, went the entire way. Yet again, it went to another penalty shootout for the Netherlands, and this time Tim Krul was not subbed on. Argentina won on penalties, and the final was set. Germany versus Argentina. A repeat of the 1986 final and the 1990 final. And a lot of the game was quite tense. Infamously, Gonzalo Higuain in the first half went through on goal one-on-one with Manuel Neuer, missing by hitting the goalpost. But all around, not too much really happened between the two sides. And then in extra time, a young kid called Mario Götze got subbed on the pitch. Andreas Schürrle was on the left-hand side, he crossed the ball in, received it on his chest before volleying it into the back of the net for Germany. Germany, for the first time since their reunification, have won the World Cup. Lionel Messi won the Golden Ball for the tournament, but Argentina fell just short of glory. The comparisons of him and Maradona will always be made. This wasn't meant to be his tournament. The reality is, historically, this final would not really be remembered for the final, but it will always be for the match before that. Brazil losing 7-1 to Germany on home soil. We may never see a shocking moment like that ever again. Brazil 5, Germany 4, Italy 3, Uruguay 2, Argentina 2, England 1, France 1, Spain 1. By the time the 2018 World Cup arrived in Russia, people didn't really know how to handle it. It was the first World Cup ever hosted in Eastern Europe. The tournament was heavily politicized, as well we are in Russia, as there were still many ongoing tensions between Russia and Western nations, where some countries even debated boycotting. FIFA insisted that football should stay separate from politics. However, as we've gathered from this entire video, no, that's impossible. So before the tournament began, there was kind of a bad vibe for the World Cup until it started, and then it became one of the most unpredictable World Cups ever. Hello, there's some new debuts. Hello Iceland, hello Panama, with £14.2 billion spent just to host it. That's a bit heavy. The group stage was full of shocks, and I know what you're thinking. Liam, how about Germany? Well, as we saw, France failed, and then Brazil failed, and then Italy failed, and then Spain failed. I mean, Germany in a group with Sweden, Mexico, and South Korea, they must make it through. The defending champions yet again was eliminated dead last in the group stage. After losing to Mexico and Toni Kroos did score a winner late on against Sweden from a free kick, they lost 2-0 to South Korea in what was a haunting game for the German national team, and it made everyone think, wow, it happened again. The reigning champions yet again were out the World Cup instantly. Ronaldo, for the first time since 2006, was actually noticeable in the World Cup, where in that first game still remains his finest World Cup legacy. Portugal 3, Spain 3, with a World Cup hat-trick, sealing it with a free kick to make it 3-3. And we're going to forget how David Gea basically threw the ball in the back of his own net. He would later score again against Morocco, and Portugal finally made it through the groups. In Group D saw a rise of another nation. Like back in 1998, Croatia were back, and with Modric, Kovacic, Mandzukic beating Argentina 3-0, Croatia topped their group. Argentina had Lionel Messi, and despite having Messi, they did struggle, almost being knocked out in the group stages. Drawing to Iceland and losing to Croatia, they had to beat Nigeria, otherwise they were sent home. Messi did score, but it went down to 1-1, and with 4 minutes left on the clock, Rojo scored that saved Argentina from national embarrassment. Shout out to Serbia v Switzerland, which politically this game is as charged as it comes in European football. So shout out to goal scorers Xhaka and Shaqiri scoring in 90th minute, and with Xhaka's and Shaqiri's Kosovo roots, their celebrations marked the tournament. Oh yeah, there's also this kid called Kylian Mbappe at France. Yeah, he's also going to be a problem. France v Argentina saw the game of the tournament, where the game went back and forth with Pavard scoring an incredible goal, slicing it into the back of the net. And all it took was a young kid in Kylian Mbappe to run across the entire length of the field to send France 4-2 up against Argentina. The pace of Mbappe was too much for the Argentines. Argentina brought it back, but the damage was done. Messi was sent home. Messi v Ronaldo, of course, plagued the entire generation for the last near decade. And it was on this night on the 30th of June that it all came crashing down, because later that same night as Messi was sent home, Cristiano Ronaldo followed him. Thanks to the heroics of Edison Cavani, Uruguay beat Portugal, and Ronaldo and Messi was gone in the same evening. Oh, that'd be a bad day if you were 12 years old. More shocks was yet to come, as Spain beat Russia felt like a simple walkover for the Spanish. Russia clawed it back and made it go all the way to penalties, where the host of the tournament, Russia, sent Spain back home. This was the first win of Russia or the Soviet Union of any kind in a knockout stage of a World Cup since 1966. However, Russia did of course get banned for doping. This was accusations from whistleblowers during this tournament, but also in all other sports and events too, like the Olympics. So keep that in mind. Belgium v Japan was a fantastic game in round of 16. This was Belgium's golden generation, with Eden Hazard, Lukaku, Kevin De Bruyne, Vincent Kompany, Courtois. So when Japan were 2-0 up by the 52nd minute, it felt like a complete nightmare. However, Belgium made an incredible comeback, leading to Nasser Chadli scoring in the 94th minute to send Japan home. Belgium breathed a sigh of relief. Colombia v England. England for many years have been an embarrassment in almost every single competition, and really they've had no pride in their nation since the 1998 World Cup and 1996 Euros. So when Colombia scored in the 93rd minute and it went to penalties, it felt like it was all happening again. England were in a World Cup penalty shootout, but somehow, for some reason, the gods were on England Gareth Southgate's side. Eric Dyer sent England through to the World Cup quarter-finals, and after being knocked out in penalty shootouts 3 times, England have finally won a penalty shootout in the FIFA World Cup. Brazil v Belgium saw Belgium finally realise they were the golden generation, knocking out Neymar's Brazil Brazil in Kazan. And Russia's World Cup would also end here. It was 2-2 and it went down to penalties yet again for Russia. And just like 1998, Croatia was in a World Cup semi-final again. In the semi-finals, France beat Belgium is for the most part kind of forgettable. Titi scored and not much really happened. The golden generation of Belgium was sent packing and really was never to be seen again. However came the other game, Croatia v England. This was a truly golden opportunity for both nations. England, despite not having a fantastic team, they had a great team unity, and under Gareth Southgate it felt like maybe this was their time when they least expected it. As 5 minutes in, Kieran Trippier scored from a free kick and sent the entire nation wild. However, Croatia's midfield took control of the game. Rakitic, Brozovic, Modric, and I don't want to point out Jordan Henderson here, but all I'm saying is it was the worst World Cup performance I've ever seen. Perisic would later score in the second half and it went to extra time. And none other but Mario Mandzukic would later score to send Croatia to the World Cup final. England were out. So then came the final, France v Croatia. Now France is a weird team, as you would think in 1998 when they won that they'll take over the entire world, and off the back of losing their own host nation European Championships on home soil to Portugal, it was time to redeem themselves. With the likes of Paul Pogba, Antoine Griezmann and Kylian Mbappe, France scored and Croatia equalised v Perisic. Paul Pogba and Mbappe, 2 goals within 6 minutes. Mandzukic scored again, but it was too late. France have won the World Cup. Kylian Mbappe becoming the only teenager to score in a World Cup final since Pele in 1958. And in a rain-soaked match in Moscow, France ruled the world. So 2018, for the most part, I would say it still looked back on quite well, with the rise of a new star in Mbappe, a newfound hope for the England national team, the collapse of giants like Germany, and of course this was the first World Cup with VAR being included. But as some may say, we may be saving the more dramatic World Cup to last. Brazil 5, Germany 4, Italy 4, France 2, Argentina 2, Uruguay 2, England 1, and Spain 1. When FIFA President Sepp Blatter raised that piece of paper to say Qatar, for multiple years it led constant scrutiny on Qatar hosting the FIFA World Cup. For the first time ever, the World Cup was being held in the Middle East. And crucially, it was played in the winter instead of the summer due to Qatar's extreme heat. And similar to Russia and any other World Cup prior, the politics and controversy before the tournament began was palpable. Allegations of bribery over the bidding process, concerns about human rights, the migrant worker conditions in building the stadiums, with many workers dying due to poor conditions, and a global debate due to their human rights policies on if they should even host it at all. A reminder for you that yet again, football is inseparable from politics, as the treatment of migrant workers, women, members of the LGBTQ+ community, allegations of a lack of a strong football culture, whereas in USA back in 1994 there was really no football culture there. At least it had the commercialization. At the time when the hosting was given, it just felt kind of random. But when the World Cup finally started, it all kind of made sense, and what followed led to potentially the greatest game in football history. In the opening game, Saudi Arabia beat Argentina 2-1, giving one of the biggest shocks in World Cup history in terms of the status of the teams, and Argentina were on the cusp of being knocked out. However, Messi stepped up, scoring against Mexico and against Poland, and Argentina were through. Lewandowski of Poland finally scored his only ever World Cup goal after all these years in this tournament. In Group D, Denmark was seen as kind of a dark horse due to how well they did back in Euro 2020, making it to semi-finals, and they came bottom of the group, being beaten by Australia, and Australia posing a bit of a surprise, making it through to the round of 16. But it was Group E that took the group stage. A group of Japan, Spain, Germany and Costa Rica. Japan beating Germany 2-1 in the opening game, and despite Spain beating Costa Rica 7-0, they were both on the line, as a draw between Spain and Germany made it so that any team could get knocked out in the final round. Japan beat Spain 2-1, and at one point Costa Rica were also beating Germany, and in a beautiful few minutes, Japan and Costa Rica were knocking out Spain and Germany. However, the Germans did fight back, beating Costa Rica 4-2, but it wasn't enough, as Germany, for the second time in a row, were knocked out in the group stage of a World Cup. In Group F saw the complete end of the Belgium golden generation, losing to Morocco, who you may find out became a big deal this tournament. And as Lukaku missed and then missed and then missed against Croatia, they were sent home. As in the round of 16, a media storm took place. Cristiano Ronaldo were dropped from the starting 11 against Switzerland. A media frenzy took place with absolute shock horror. However, it kind of made sense, as Gonzalo Ramos, who replaced Cristiano Ronaldo, scored a hat-trick, beating Switzerland 6-1. The other eyes were led to Morocco, who came up against Spain, beating them on penalties. And the storylines of the competition was set. Lionel Messi on one side of the bracket, and France led by Kylian Mbappe, with every single game feeling part of a larger destiny narrative building towards one final moment. England had a fairly strong tournament, reaching the quarterfinals again under Gareth Southgate, but a Harry Kane penalty miss meant that they were knocked out by France. And it was in the quarterfinals that made the tournament blow up. Netherlands v Argentina, which led to the most yellow cards and red cards in World Cup history. It ended 2-2, but that's not giving it credit. Lionel Messi showing a side of him that we've never seen before, cupping his ears of Louis van Gaal on the Netherlands bench. This felt like a new man, and you'd be wrong to forget that Argentina were 2-0 up, by the way, without Weghorst, of all players, scoring not just once but twice in the 101st minute from a free kick routine to send it to extra time. And it went to penalties, with Messi scoring again, and Argentina was sent through to the semi-final. The drama, the back and forths, the controversy, this was a tough match, and Argentina celebrated in front of the Netherlands' faces, leading to it being called the Battle of Losail. In the other quarter-final, Croatia beat Brazil. It was a tough game by both sides until in extra time it blew up, with Neymar looking like he had his fateful moment at last, scoring a fantastic, well-worked goal in the 105th minute. However, with 3 minutes left to go, Petkovic equalised, and Rodrigo and Marquinhos missing their penalties, Croatia knocked out Brazil, forever chasing that World Cup dream and what seemed at the time as Neymar's last dance. Because keep in mind, the storylines of World Cup 2022 in Qatar felt like the complete end of an era. It did feel that way, with Ronaldo, Messi, Neymar, Modric, Eden Hazard, Karim Benzema, Gareth Bale, Sergio Busquets, Angel Di Maria, Antoine Griezmann, Thomas Muller, Manuel Neuer, and don't forget Luis Suarez. And this was always meant to be seen as Messi and Ronaldo's last dance. However, as we know now, it wasn't the case, but it felt that way. Hence why when Morocco played against Portugal in the quarterfinals, it felt even more powerful. Morocco became the first African nation to make it to a World Cup semi-final, doing what Ghana couldn't do back in 2010. Ronaldo was yet again left on the bench and was subbed on, but it meant nothing. The continent of Africa rejoiced, and Ronaldo was sent packing, crying, walking underneath the stadium tunnel. After only scoring one goal, it felt like Ronaldo's legacy in World Cup was over. Now, if the quarterfinals was incredible, the semi-finals is where it went a little bit drab. Argentina beat Croatia 3-0 in quite convincing fashion, with Messi scoring yet again, and France beat Morocco 2-0, scoring early on, and Morocco's World Cup dream was over, because what followed next can only be described as football's finest night, and the greatest World Cup game ever played. Argentina beat France, Messi v Mbappe, for what people labelled as the greatest player of all time versus the man that was set to replace him. Destiny was here. Argentina dominated much of the match as Messi scored a penalty early on, and then Di Maria from a counter-attack made it 2-0 to Argentina. With 10 minutes left to go, it looked like Argentina were going to have a routine win in the final. However, France and Kylian Mbappe exploded to life. Mbappe scored from a penalty, and then immediately, about 30 seconds later, scored an incredible volley in the bottom right corner, forcing extra time. Messi scored again, and then Mbappe completed a World Cup hat-trick, the first in a World Cup final in 56 years. What we were seeing was Messi and Mbappe dragging their nation to the promised land, a contrast of two complete generations, and with a record of 1.5 billion people watching on television, it was the most widely watched televised sporting events in history, and it all came down to penalties. However, we cannot ignore the save made in the last second of the game by Emiliano Martinez to stop Colo Moroni scoring in the final seconds of the game. And in penalties, they did the business. Messi scored. Mbappe scored. However, Coleman's penalty was saved and Tchouaméni missed, having the entire nation on Gonzalo Montiel's shoulders. He put it away. Lionel Messi has shaken hands with paradise. The little boy from Rosario Santa Fe has just pitched up in heaven, and he was not alone. Finally, after all these years and decades of being compared to Diego Maradona, he finally did what many thought he never could. He never had the character to drag Argentina to paradise, but it was finally done. Perhaps the most polarizing World Cup of all time, where on one hand of it, the politics was heavily debated, with all the human rights concerns and the migrants and the people of the country, modernized stadiums and a unique atmosphere based on a new forming world. Qatar, for many people and in this new generation, will always be looked back on as the greatest World Cup of all time. The rise of Morocco, Mbappe's final masterclass hat-trick, and Messi finally lifting the World Cup trophy to define his career. And with World Cup 2026 only a week away, charged with even further politics, there is still many more stories to be written. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. It's been almost 2 hours long. I've been working on this video for about an entire week, but I'm very proud of it. If you did enjoy, like the video, subscribe, because this is my proudest ever video I think I've ever done. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.